You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network.
Hello there, and welcome back to Force Perspectives. I'm your host, Michael Cohen, and joining me, as always, is the bead to my phode, Joe Hogan.
Jabaduhat.
This is our first episode with our new album art. So if you guys haven't seen it,
on that. It's really good. Go check it out.
Yeah, go check out our Instagram or Twitter, anywhere where we've got a profile picture, or even in the podcast app. It won't be like the episode art that we've got here, but it will be the album art for the show art. So depending on what podcast app you're on, it'll appear in different places, but you can go find that. And it is Joe and myself as the two heads of a what is it called? I can't remember the species, but Fodzenbeed, the pod race announcer, from the Phantom Menace. So it's us as the two heads of that character.
You crushed it, man. It came out really, really good. I'm very proud of you. You did good work.
Thank you. It just came to me in a flash. Like just pure inspiration out of the ether, out of nowhere. And I actually had wanted to I commission another artist to do it. If you follow me on Instagram at all, you'll see that I share a lot of her work. It's Dazzling Jedi on Instagram. She is so incredible, such an amazing artist, and I wanted her to do it, but she's swamped with school and stuff, so she wasn't able to do it. But she said to me, she's like, "You should do it. You should do it in like your style. It'll work. You should do it." And I was like, "All right, fine." So I did, and it did turn out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it.
That's pretty great.
I think the key is that like I wanted I Dazzling Jedi, she's really good at likenesses. Like her Rey and Kylo Ren are really great likenesses, as is like her Padme and that sort of thing. She's really good at that. And so that's kind of what I was thinking, was almost like us photoshopped, but in more of like a painterly way. But I don't know that she would have had the guts to go as ugly as I did. And
I prefer it.
Yeah.
I prefer it.
And I mean, I think it's what it called for, right? So
lean into it.
But yeah, we're kind of in this transition period at ThunderQuack right now. We're doing a bunch of stuff. We got a bunch of stuff on the move, and you guys will hear more about it next month. And if you're listening to the ThunderQuack podcast, you'll hear about it soon. But one of those things was that like Force Perspectives with you and I has kind of like morphed into this other thing that I actually hadn't intended for it to be when I started doing it, but that I am very, very happy with. And so it really is just, our two heads almost equal one when it comes to our takes on Star Wars. So I think that was kind of where that idea came from, and I thought it was about time that like we had some branding that really reflected what the podcast has devolved into, if we're being honest. But
it was very clever. You should be very proud. It's honestly, it came out really good. It's probably my favorite coloring from you I've ever seen, honestly. Like,
okay, so
really good, man, really good.
There's a little bit of a methodology behind that one. I sourced all of the colors from a page of Dark Empire.
Nice.
Because
awesome.
yeah, I wanted it to have its own sort of color palette, because I have in Procreate, I kind of have these color palettes that I sort of rely on, and then I tweak them after the fact.
Mm.
But I wanted to start, like, I had started doing that and it wasn't really working for me. And so I was like, I need to have like a really solid color palette. And I immediately thought, as we talked about a couple episodes ago, talking about comics, um, the color palettes from the Dark Empire books are so good.
Yeah.
So I
They're awesome.
grabbed a page with sort of the color space that I wanted, and dropped it into a tool online that would like pull out the hex values, and then I created a color palette from that, and then I just used those color palettes as my base. So that's kind of how that came to be. Um, yeah, it did come out. It came out really well. It captured the vibe that I needed it to capture, and I think that's the most important part, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It definitely got us there. So,
Uh,
yeah, and
and Tina was just like, "That's awesome." It looks just like so. You got Tina's approval, who is not easy to impress with likenesses. Every time I try to do a likeness, she's like, "I think you gotta squeeze." Like she gives it to me straight, and she's like, "Yeah, no, that looks like you. It's awesome." So
yeah, yeah. The key to likeness is that you have to go a little bit caricature with it. Otherwise, if you're too soft on it, then people won't pick up on it, especially like with cartooning, right? Like you
mm,
have to take some stuff, some flaws, and you have to accentuate them, because that's what makes us who we are, right? Like
mm.
it's how that works. So yeah, like I kind of gave myself more like like exaggerated, like Trailer Park Boys bubbles style glasses. Like my pupils are a bit bigger than yours, and I'm
Mm.
my stare is a little more vacant, and then yours is a little bit more um I don't know.
Sleazy.
Yeah, sleazy. Yeah, that's the right word for it, for sure.
Eh?
um it's, what's really funny is that, like, I finished it. I did that first pass on it, and I sent it over to you, and you're like, that's really good. And you sent it to Tina, she was like, that was really good. And then we were continue talking, and I was like, and you were like, I don't know if my ears are that big. And I was like, you know what it is, like your forehead's not big enough
Yeah,
in
yeah.
comparison to your ears.
My recedingness.
So I made your head bigger, just in general. Like the whole bulb of your
Awesome,
head I made bigger, the
awesome.
top of the skull. And when I did that, I looked back at it and I was like, this is just Leisure Suit Larry. Like that's what I drew. I just drew Leisure Suit Larry. But I if the shoe fits. Yeah. So and then I think it was Tim Dipple on the Discord gave you a great compliment
Oh,
off of it,
dude,
which is
the
that
best
you look,
compliment I can possibly receive.
yeah, which is that you look like Venkman, you look like Bill Murray. And I've never really like put that together, but you do have a very similar hairstyle, especially when your hair gets a little bit
Yeah.
longer and is a little bit more like wild. You
D
got that Venkman Murray vibe going. So
and it's one of those things that the first time me, Tina, and Carl ran around Manhattan dressed as Ghostbusters, I got that compliment twice, and I
mm,
loved it. And it's that I never really realized it before, and then I, like, paid attention to the movie the next time I'd watched it, and his hair every shot is totally different. It
oh
just
yeah,
does not cooperate. And
yeah.
I'm like, wow, I do look like Bill Murray because my hair never cooperates and it always looks different every 4 seconds. And the next time we went out, more recently, last October, I got the same compliment and I was like, this is amazing. I love this. From now on, I'm only wearing the Venkman name tag because normally I have my Hogan one,
Yeah.
but I also have a Venkman one. So from now on, I'm just running around as Venkman because now this is the third time. No, okay, so twice the first time, twice this most recent time, and now also Tim. Tim did it right?
Yeah,
Tim did
yeah.
it. Okay, yeah, um, yeah. So now 5 times I've received it. Every time I feel better than the last because clearly there's some consistency going on
That's
with
awesome.
that. So,
We're veering into
yeah.
ThunderQuack territory, but just
Yes.
before we
Sorry.
steer, yeah, steer out of the skid. Well, actually, you steer into the skid. By the way, just if you're driving right now and it's treacherous and you are in a skid, you turn into the skid. Don't turn out. You'll lose control. Anyways, so turning into the skid real quickly so that we can get control back. what you need to do is you need to get the orange shirt. You got
Oh
to get
yeah,
it.
the jacket you mean, right?
Yeah, the orange jacket. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a shacket. They didn't have that term back then, but it kind of is. Um, yeah, yeah, you definitely need to do that because I think if you did that and then you just put your arms out to the side and spun around in a circle, I think that people like if you were twirling on the streets, people would be like, "Holy crap, it's a Ghostbuster." Um, yeah, but that's not what we're here to talk about.
We
That's
are
what
not.
go listen to the ThunderQuack podcast. Please do go listen to the ThunderQuack podcast, where more often than not, I think at this point we have talked about Ghostbusters. So but on this episode, we are, a couple weeks late, but we are talking about love. We're talking. It's February. It's still February. We're still
Close
technically in
enough.
the zone, I think. Actually, this comes out to the general public on March 1st, doesn't it? Whoops. So, St. Patrick's Day is also romantic, kind of.
Yeah.
Um, but we're talking about true love. We're talking about the one true pairings of Star Wars. And initially this was just going to be a conversation, and then we started putting a list together, and then it was like, I guess we're ranking these. I guess that's what's happening. I guess that's, which has kind of, I think, become our shtick, is that we just kind of, you and I just kind of rank things, and then
Hopefully not argue about
yeah,
it.
yeah.
We're
So
gonna argue today, man.
we
I
are,
know where
we
we're
are,
gonna argue.
we are. It's fine. It's fine. It'll be fine. It's all right. Um, we've got a list of, what was it, 14. Oh, that's funny because February 14th it's
There you
Valentine's Day.
go.
This would have been a great Valentine's Day episode.
Would
I
have
really should have
been.
thought about
Coulda,
it.
shoulda, woulda. Michael.
This 4-week schedule kind of puts us in a funny place where it's like you can't really do themed stuff that often, but yeah, it works out. 14. We did it on purpose. This was actually see, this is the chaotic vibe. Like, this is the thing. This is the two of us just making it up as we go along. But we're gonna run down this list, and then we're going to, well, as we do, I think we're gonna kind of sort them, uh, uh, into a ranking. So let's start. Let's get into it. At the bottom of our list, this is in, not, it's a somewhat particular order, but not really. We're gonna start with Iden Versio and Del Miko from Battlefront 2. I don't think I have a ton to say about these two. I mean, I love Iden Versio. Del is an interesting character. I don't know. These two come in the midst of like the glut of Imperial defectors,
Mhm.
right? There was an era there where I really like I think it was like immediately sort of post Disney, that every story was about somebody who was an Imperial that defected to the rebellion or the
Yeah.
resistance, like a first order to the resistance sort of thing. Like, it was so many stories, because like Sabine's story really focused around that in one of the seasons of Rebels. And yeah, it just, every other character, it felt like they were an Imperial that
Was
ends up a rebel. Alphabet Squadron, I think, had a character that was an Imperial that gets captured and then gets made into an asset for a covert fighter squadron.
I mean,
Alphabet
obviously,
Squadron are great. Those are great books.
obviously Finn is like the big
Yeah,
one,
Finn
right?
Finn is a big part of it. Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to remember. I actually don't remember this game other than not being that into it, which really surprised me. Squadrons, wasn't that also? Didn't that also have some like Imperial defection? Or am I remembering that wrong?
Yeah, I don't
Really, I
remember.
don't remember that game. I played it once. I was like,
Oh,
nah.
the story stuff in that game was just like, because there was no story when you were actually in your starfighter. It was all having to like go up to characters that just sort of stood there in an idle animation and their
Yeah,
lips moved. It
yeah.
was, yeah, the story was not why you were playing that game. And to me, it was like, I just skip all of this, and can you just send me on missions? um yeah, no, I Squadrons didn't do it for me. I don't think I ever even finished it, uh but yeah. Iden Versio and Del Miko, these two were part of what was the Inferno Squadron, right? And then everything goes down with Operation Cinder,
Hmm.
post Return of the Jedi. And they end up sort of caught in they're almost like killed on one of the planets because Cinder was like just destroy, right? Like it didn't it was like destroy the Imperials, destroy the rebels, destroy everything. Like just it was Palpatine's um his plan to just basically like if I die the galaxy dies with me sort of thing.
Mhm.
um in order to keep the chaos. And I now that we have the context of Rise of Skywalker, you would say that like he did it in order to distract everybody, to give him time to build up forces and all of that. Which, I mean, you could still have said that at the time that it was like, building towards the First Order, which I think it was. But yeah, it ends up throwing Iden and Del sort of into this like, are they with the Empire or against the Empire? And then sort of through that crucible, they end up falling in love. I mean, I think Del was in love with her to begin with, right? That's a proper reading of that story?
I don't know. I mean, he definitely cared about her. He
Yeah.
always like had her back and everything. But I that wasn't my read. I just kind of
Okay.
the that felt like it kind of evolved once their loyalties changed.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's when they kind of saw that side to each other and figured out like, oh, this isn't right. This isn't working. We need to get out of here. That's kind of where I felt like that switch was flipped.
So no, okay, so this was my interpretation of it, and I think it's based on some of the stuff that Luke says to him in that mission when you're playing alongside Luke, right? With all the
Mhm.
bugs and stuff. Because he leaves the Empire when Iden does, but he's still kind of like, he doesn't really have a direction or a path. He's just following her. And I think, if I remember right, that Luke kind of says something along those lines of like what is, like, where's your loyalty? Like,
Mhm.
is it to the Empire? Is it to justice, or is it to Iden? Like, are you like, basically like, are you following someone? Because I don't think that he knows Iden at that point, right? But
Mhm.
because they're still kind of Imperials, they haven't joined the rebellion at that point. And that's the mission where Del makes the turn, right? He goes from identifying as an Imperial to like, then he has to, in order to survive, he's got to fight alongside Luke, and that is what changes his perspective, because he was told that Luke was like a war criminal and like, all of this stuff,
Yeah.
that he was this monster. And it's like, and it turns out that like, oh, he's just like this guy, like he's just a man. um
Mhm.
and so he kind of like, it's after that I think that it changes. But if I remember right, it's been such a long time since I played it. And that game is awful to play, like from a video game standpoint, it plays like trash, but as far as I'm concerned, but that story is so good. um
What do you mean the gameplay is trash? What's
Battlefront,
trash
yeah.
about it?
Battlefront, the gameplay.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
yeah.
I like the gameplay. I think
Oh,
it's fun.
I it feels like you're playing a PlayStation 2 game most of the time. Like, I just remember like using Luke and like the stomping on the bugs, and just,
Okay, yeah, the heroes play like
it's
garbage.
awful.
I
It's
think
awful.
normal gameplay is fine, but
It's
he
it's acceptable,
I
but
I would rather play as, like, the specialty characters, like the clone commandos and the
yeah,
ARC
yeah,
troopers and stuff, and the jet troopers, like, that stuff's way more fun to me, but,
yeah,
like, the actual heroes, like, when you're running around like Darth Vader, you should feel unstoppable.
sure.
Instead, I feel like a sleepy elephant.
Yeah, yeah. My thing with the not to get into like a video game debate on this one, but my thing with Battlefront and Battlefront 2, with both of them, is that you're talking about an era where we've got uh I I don't really play the Call of Duty games, so I can't compare to that, but I can compare to Battlefield, which controls like butter, right? If you're talking about just a straight up and down first person shooter, it is, I love it. I haven't played a Battlefield in a long time. I don't even know if they still put them out, but like back in that era, right? Back in that PS3 era, PS3, PS4, PS4 era, I those games were awesome. that they controlled beautifully. And then you've got other stuff that's a little bit more like out there and pushing the boundaries, like Titanfall 2. And if you compare the gameplay in Battlefront 2 to Titanfall 2, it's night and day, right?
Mm.
Like Titanfall 2, you forget that you're playing a video game and you're like running on walls and jumping around and grappling and like all of this stuff in that game that is just like, it's Titanfall 2 remains, even in 2024, one of the best first person shooter experiences that I've had, not to mention the fact that it's got a great story. And then that team goes on to make Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, right? So because that's Respawn. But
I did not realize that.
yeah.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
and if for
I
people who haven't played Titanfall 2,
good.
go play Titanfall 2. It is one of the
Yeah,
best
it's good.
Star Wars games you'll play. Because it's Star Wars mechs, but there's a reason why they got tapped to come in and make Fallen Order under like ridiculous pressure. But we'll talk more about Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor in a little bit. But yeah, so I just, if I compare it to other games of that type, it doesn't even hold a candle as far as I'm concerned. But anyways, Aiden and Dell, I feel like they're going to be probably close to the bottom of the list. I like they're great together, but like they just don't really stand out. And the problem is that there's the way that they told the story in Battlefront is that it's like it's kind of complete. We kind of have the start to finish. Actually, I don't. Maybe that's not true. Because maybe was the DLC that like Aiden, was she dead or had she gone missing?
She sacrifices herself so that her kid survives.
Yeah,
because they were on like a mission together.
Yeah. That's the end of the game. That's the end of the game. But then there's DLC, because we were talking about this before we started recording. There's DLC that's after that, and I think the DLC that's after that implied that she might still be alive. I'm pretty sure.
The end of the actual game is the Battle of Jakku.
Is it?
Yeah. And then the DLC is years and years and years later.
Okay.
Maybe you're right. She sacrifices herself and Kylo Ren shows up and I think kills Dell too. If I remember correctly. So both of them are dead.
We probably should have prepped for this episode before we did it.
But like this was such a last minute addition though. Aiden and Dell, so like whatever. Who cares?
That's the thing. They almost didn't even make the list, so they're gonna stay at the bottom.
They were an afterthought.
Yeah. Okay. Next on our list in no particular order, and I'm gonna just immediately put them above Dell and Aiden, is Din and Bo-Katan.
I disagree. I already disagree.
You already disagree?
Because that's the thing. Like, I love them as characters and I love their relationship, but I don't think they have a romantic relationship. Yes. I think it could, but it's not yet. It's like I don't even think this one should qualify, if I'm being totally honest.
I don't think that their relationship is traditional, and I think that that's probably one of the things that, like, Din is a weird dude. It's not this is not on Bo-Katan. I feel like Bo-Katan could have a perfectly normal relationship, but Din is incapable. Din is half a person at best. Right. And I think as a result, he like there's a lot. It's sort of like an unrequited thing. Like I think that he longingly.
What?
Yeah. Don't you think so?
No. Not at all. Not at all.
Why do you think it's not?
Why do you think it is? I have no evidence to think it is. That's why.
Because he just
coming from.
He's constantly like in season 3, he's constantly just like gazing at her, and he keeps going back.
He's got a helmet on. He looks. He just gazes at everybody.
No, dude. There's a vibe. There's a vibe, and. He keeps going back to her, even though she's like, if I see you again, I will kill you. And but he keeps going like, hey, can you help me though? Well, can you please help me with Grogu? And then she's like, fine, I'll help you with Grogu. And like the three of them are this little family unit. by the end of the season. That the shot of the two of them protecting Grogu together and then Grogu protecting both of them, to me, is like very clear symbolic storytelling that like these three are a little family unit. They are their thing. But then like they obviously separate at the very end and he goes back to his homestead and she stays on Mandalore to rebuild. But like there's a, I don't know. I feel like they are endgame. I want them together. If not them, then Din's got to be with Cobb. But because the two of them have so much chemistry, but they're not on the list. I but yeah, I think that's the scene on the big like the pirate ship, right? When they're traveling across the desert before they get attacked by the turtle dinosaur. The gigantic turtle dinosaur. You know what I'm talking about? With the Mandalorians that are like still on Mandalore.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
there's that moment that they have sort of like it's like twilight and not the books, it's the time of day I'm talking about. And they like he's like whatever you need, whenever you need, like wherever you are, like I like you, I pledge myself to you.
So
Like that.
your song has not yet been written.
Yeah.
I
That
look,
that was a
I
proposal. That was a proposal, dude. Like
dude.
that's what that was.
Look, I get that Mandalorian culture, the stuff just it goes differently than it does in a traditional romantic relationship. I get it, and I even see it being potential groundwork, but it's not there yet for me. It's just I just don't think it's there yet. I
Yeah,
think they are the couple that are friends first and work really well and realize later on, oh yeah, this is a thing. That's what I feel like their relationship will turn into. But right
okay.
now, I think they just really respect each other.
I don't know. I can't meet you there. Like that is not my reading of it at all.
Okay, that's
But I'll give
look.
it to you. I'll give it
I
to you
don't,
because it's
I
not
don't.
literal.
No, 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 no. Don't give it to me because honestly, I don't think Iden and Dell are like that great a romantic couple anyway.
Okay.
So like,
Okay.
this is not a hill I'm dying on. I'm just very surprised that you feel the way that you feel. That's all.
You know what? I need to send you some materials. I need to send you some stuff because I feel like
Okay.
you're approaching it from like a very literal, like on not on the surface, because I don't want to say that like your perspective on it is shallow, but I think that you're looking at it in a very literal way, whereas I'm looking at it in a very symbolic way and like a very like from a mythic storytelling perspective.
Mhm.
And these two, like when you look at the tropes and the mythic like sort of the archetypal stuff that's going on with the two characters, like they are if you're sort of like looking at it in like a classical storytelling, like looking at those motifs, when he says that stuff to her, it is from that perspective very literally a proposal. He is saying
Mhm.
like I want to be joined to you forever, right? So yeah, all I there are some episodes of What the Force, and there's probably some stuff on Wit and Folly that I can send you, and you know I'm gonna convert you to all of this stuff eventually, but
He's also half her age, right? Like
that's
I'm
fine.
looking at a thing here that says the minimum age of Bo-Katan
Yeah,
is 64 years old because of everything that was said in Clone Wars
yeah,
and Rebels and all that stuff.
yeah,
And he's like 30.
yeah.
It's really
But
fun.
they're both adults, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's fine. That's
Yeah,
he likes older ladies. There is no shade on that, man. I get it.
he's looking for somebody that'll step on him, and
I
she
mean,
will. So
she's got pretty tough boots, so
yeah, so okay, let's move on to the next one. And the next
okay.
one I'm going to put above this because it is pretty heavily implied in The Last Jedi. Although it gets dropped in the subsequent movie, like
Yeah,
every plot
it
line.
does.
From the entire sequel trilogy, everything gets dropped because somehow Palpatine returned, and for some reason that's the only thing that matters at that point. But the next one is Finn and Rose. Um, I like their chemistry together. I enjoy their storyline in The Last Jedi. But I enjoy it, I think, more because I like Rose and less because I like the two of them together.
Mhm.
I don't really, I don't know. I don't, it's, I mean, the next one that we'll talk about will make my position even more clear, but like, this is not an end game situation for me. I don't see these two together, um, in the long term if they did get together.
Mm.
But
Well, they
yeah,
weren't because they weren't together in the next movie,
yeah,
really.
yeah, yeah. It's funny because there's a book that takes place in between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, which is, I think, Resistance Reborn or
Okay.
Rebellion Reborn. I can't remember. I think it's Resistance Reborn. And if it gets into anything, it gets into the next one that I'm going to talk about more than it examines anything with Finn and Rose. But it actually, if I remember right, it kind of like shuts it down in that book. Like it actively like gets to the point where like Rose is like, "Oh, hey, I don't feel that way about you. Like I love you, but I don't like love you, you know?" Like, and so Finn, I don't know. Finn is funny cuz Finn, I think, has a romantic entanglement with every other lead character at
Yeah,
some point in the
literally
sequel
everyone.
trilogy. It's I yeah, there's that's just John Boyega though. John Boyega just has chemistry with everyone, right?
He's got that riz, man.
He does have that riz. I yeah. But yeah, but Finn and Rose, I don't know. I don't know. Where what do you think? Where do we put this? Do we put this above or below Dinbo
I mean, everything goes above Dinbo for me.
for you? Yeah.
So I have no
Yeah.
problem with them
Okay,
there.
we'll leave it there. We'll leave it there. It's currently at number 1. But now we can talk about the real one. This is the real one.
About to be dethroned to number two.
Yeah, and this is one of my top threes. So, and that is Finpo, Storm
Yeah.
Pilot, as we call it in the community. Um, this comes off of the the scene in The Force Awakens when Poe is like, "Hey, that's my jacket." And then Finn goes to give it back to him. He's like, "No, keep it. It suits you." And he does that thing where he bites his lip, and it's been interpreted in a certain way, and but more than that, the fuel that's on these flames comes from Oscar himself.
Yeah.
He wants Finn and Poe to be together, and he made a lot of comments, actually several comments during the press tour for Rise of Skywalker, that like when asked about it, when pressed on it, if there would be anything in Rise, that Disney shot it down.
Mm.
Like that he legitimately went to I'm assuming like Kathleen Kennedy and JJ Abrams and was like, this is the storyline that I would like to see in this last movie, with these two characters, and it was shut down. And so this is one of the things, I don't talk about it as much as I talk about some of the other things that drive me nuts in that movie, but this is one of the things that really bugs me in Rise, is that their relationship is turned into this really gross, like dude bro, like Mountain Dew Halo doubles kind of like relationship that undermines both of their storylines, as well as attempts to erase this. But here's the thing, you can't erase it. If you look at the shot at the end of the movie when the two of them hug before Ray gets back, when it's just the two of them, they have an embrace, and that embrace is like, there's an intensity to it. So there's stuff throughout all three sequels that, for me, um it heavily implies all of this. And unfortunately, Disney and Lucasfilm are not brave enough in the current climate to push that, and let that story, evolve organically in the way that it has. But yeah, it's and to be clear, the reason why is because if they put that relationship you wouldn't be able to cut around Finn and Poe if you put them together at the end of Rise, at some point in that movie. If you paired them up in that way, it would be very difficult to edit that out for the overseas market, because um, I think it's like China as well as several other Asian countries will they will just not allow your movie. Like they'll just completely like
Yeah.
ban it in the country
Yeah.
if you have any homosexual or queer relationships in it. It's just not allowed. It's literally
In
illegal. So
in general, like, weren't the posters for China like John Boyega is like like a third
removed.
of the
Yeah.
size he is, or removed? Yeah, like if
Yeah.
he even made the poster in the first place. So there's
I
a lot
think
of
so.
knockdowns.
Yeah, there are Force Awakens posters where he is both reduced in size and full on removed, like just not on
Gross.
the poster.
Gross.
And then I think that he was like almost absent from the Last Jedi marketing as well. And that's one of those. That is one of those places where Disney, like there are a lot of people out there who are very critical of Disney and Star Wars. They're critical
Mhm.
of Disney and Star Wars because it's too woke, and they're mad about all of these politics in their Star Wars, because they're intellectually dishonest or just straight up ignorant. But this is the one. This is one of the spots. There's a couple of things that Disney has done with Star Wars that I am not a big fan of. This attitude, the way that John Boyega was treated across the board by Disney, is one of the things that frustrates me the most, because he was the biggest supporter, like he was the biggest fan out of all of them going into it, right? Like I mean, like and that's a tall order. Oscar is also a massive Star Wars fan, right?
Mhm.
um but John is like straight up and down one of us, right? I And so for them to sort of treat him the way that they treated him for very understandable but still unacceptable reasons.
Yeah.
Like that's sort of my position on it. Is like I get it. I from a business standpoint, I understand why Disney and Lucasfilm take the stance that they do with a lot of this stuff, which is very neutral, right? But at the same time, it's very frustrating, because on the one hand you'll go to the parks, and in the parks, especially around summertime, right, when we were there a couple of years ago in May for Star Wars Celebration, tons of pride stuff, just slathered in rainbows, right?
Yeah.
Which is like its own, sort of bramble bush that we don't need to get into. But like they will do that, and they will show that support. But then when it comes to like their actual product, like what they're actually selling, not the merchandise, but what they're actually selling, which is these stories, they shy away from it more often than not. And it's really frustrating, because like there was an element of the movie Raya, which is funny. We're talking about, Finn and Rose a second ago, and that's Kelly Marie Tran. There was meant to
Oh,
be,
really? I
yeah,
didn't
there was
realize
meant to be a queer relationship in that, right?
that.
um but that was sort of, downplayed and essentially erased from that as well. So there's stuff in that movie that people then feel is sort of queer baiting and that sort of thing in some of the marketing, because it doesn't show up in the movie.
I
um
Please educate me. I've heard
yeah.
that phrase before. What does queer baiting actually mean?
So queer baiting is when you heavily imply things, but you never straight up say it,
Okay.
or you
So
heavily
you're
imply
not, like,
things
committing to it. Okay.
for marketing. Like you'll put things in marketing, or
Okay.
you'll allow the fandom to run with something, and you'll even like support it as a company and be like, yeah, totally, Storm Pilot is great. But then when it comes to the actual product, it not only do you steer away from it, but like you'll go out of your way to say it's not the case, right?
Okay, weird.
So yeah, so that it's basically when a company uses queerness as a way to get people to purchase something, only to discover that there is zero queer content or
Gotcha.
anti-queer
Okay.
content
Yeah, that
in
makes
the
sense.
product itself, right? So
Okay.
yeah, yeah, and it's a yeah, it's kind of, I mean,
So
it is in Rise
do
of
you
Skywalker, because they have the two women that kiss at the end, right? And
right?
they, like, there was marketing, there was promotion during the press tour of like, oh yeah, we have a like a same sex
Right. I remember that.
relationship in Rise of Skywalker, and then it's just these two women in the background kiss, and it's cut out in most regions. It's pretty much just for North America.
I remember
Um,
forgetting about it, like,
yeah,
before I saw the movie, and then in the movie, I'm not even sure if I noticed it the first time, and then I remember hearing, like, "Oh, people flipping out over the kiss." I was like, "What kiss?
yeah,
There was a
yeah.
kiss?"
Yeah, so it's like that is an example of queer
Okay,
baiting, because
okay.
that they put that in there just to be like, see, we do like queer people. And it's like, no, that doesn't count, because it's just tokenism, right?
Mm.
It's like it's like saying the guy in the 1976 Superman movie that says to Superman, when he changes into his costume for the first time, "Hey man, that's one bad outfit," which is one of my favorite lines in the entire Superman franchise. Um, it's like saying that guy makes the movie diverse because that black guy says that thing. And it's like, no, that was some tokenism, and it was actually a little bit exploitative. And it's like he's, it speaking in jive talk and all right, like, so it's like I look at this on the same level as that, where it's
Mm.
like, yeah, no, like when people call for queer representation, you want it front and center if it's gonna be there, right? So yeah, I really wish that they had the guts to make this what both Oscar and John were fully in support of and prepared to do on screen. Um, still, it's still a little bit of a weird thing, because like I don't know that either of them necessarily identify as queer. I mean, Oscar gives off a vibe. He's I what's heteroflexible, to say the least. I would assume. But yeah, like it's you're still in a place of like, well, if you're gonna have queer characters, they should probably be played by queer actors, and not like, because then you are still kind of in this weird tokenism thing
Mm.
and that sort of thing. But at the same time, like listen, if you had a an interracial homosexual relationship in a Star Wars movie, oh boy, it would be a big deal. It would be a big deal for representation. It would also be a big deal on the flame side of things. So it's like, that's where I come back to it. I get it. I understand why it's not canon and it's not in the movies. Um, at the same time, like, I will never, ever, ever, ever let this die. I will never let it die, because the two of them had such amazing chemistry on screen. And the the vibe in The Force Awakens, I just want them together. I just want them to smush, just want their faces to just like to become one. Because I don't know, I just think it would be great. I think I love them together. They're so much fun together. And I think that it would add this other element that would take their characters to this other level, and as well as like making them the Han and Leia of the sequel trilogy, I think would have been just like the best. I Because you've got with Kylo and Rey, which we'll talk about, you've got like the reverse Anidala, right? As people call it. But I It would have been really cool to see that like Han Leia sort of relationship as well, of like these two that that bicker a little bit, but it's like, so there's the shot in The Last Jedi. This is one of the places where I really appreciate Ryan, is that he left the Finn Rose thing ambiguous, even though it's like it's very much there, but it's still a little bit ambiguous. But he also includes some Finn post stuff that is also ambiguous, leaving room for that story. The scene when they're talking in the hallway is like I and there's like guys moving between them or whatever, is like a reference to Han and Leia arguing on
Oh,
Hoth,
I love
right?
that.
So if you go back to, it's like, I think it's like after he's
Cool.
gotten dressed, and then they're sort of like going back and forth. And I think that it's also like it's not as long as the scene originally was. I think that there's a much longer scene in the deleted scenes, if I remember right. But yeah, it was there. Like he put that in as like it's a direct shot for shot
Oh, I
reference
love that.
in the extended version. I think in the part, the one that was cut. So it was like there was intention there. But I think that there might have been a little bit of like studio meddling of him being sort of forced to put, like, I think that he paired Finn and Rose up as like a duo of like, go off on your adventure. But I think that there was a little bit of like a studio Disney thing of like, make it look like they're gonna kiss at the end.
Mm.
um and yeah, so like what was a friendship thing sort of looks a little bit more like a romance thing. Um but if Oscar wants to kiss John Boyega, I think that he should be
Do
allowed to
it.
kiss John Boyega.
Do it, you
So
coward.
yeah, so they're our number one right now. I'm gonna let you talk at length about this next one because you know more about it than I do.
Okay, so next one is Kyle Katarn and Jan Ors. Some people
Mhm.
might be like, I don't know who the hell that is. Kyle Katarn, main character of the Dark Forces and Jedi Knight series. Um, their story is actually pretty simple, but keep in mind this was late 90s Star Wars, expanded universe material, video games, and a couple of like little, um, not junior novels, but kind of like graphic novel slash
It
novel
okay,
releases.
yeah. We talked about this a little. You mentioned this
Yeah.
on the last episode when we were talking about
Yes.
EU characters, and
Yeah.
I just want to put out there, because at the time that these were released, the term graphic novel did refer to those
Right.
Dark Forces books.
Right.
So what a graphic novel meant was that you had it was a novel, usually more of a novella, like not 300 pages, closer to like 150 pages, but that would be like fully illustrated throughout. So you would have like regular illustrations, like every like 3 or 4 pages, right?
Mm.
um and it's a format that's kind of died, because trade paperbacks, which are collected
Yeah.
editions of comics, became a thing in sort of like the late 90s. I mean, like a trade paperback was a thing before that, but the collection of like regular, because comic storytelling sort of shifted away from issues into like 3 or 4 comic arcs. And as they did that, it was like, okay, Dark Horse actually was one of the ones who really pushed this with Star Wars, because they would do a 6-issue series, and then they would collect the 6-issue series like Dark Empire into a trade paperback. And so trade paperbacks became super popular, took over that market, and the graphic novel actually like died off as a format, and
Mm.
nobody really does it anymore. You see it a little bit in like young middle grade stuff, like the Scholastic stuff. You see sort of that format, but it's not quite the same thing. But yeah, so at the time, this would have been referred to as a graphic novel, but now it sort of has this weird like, what is it? It's a book with
Yeah.
illustrations, because it's also in the format of a comic book, right? Like
Mm.
size wise, it's the format of a comic
Yeah.
book,
It's
but then
the
it's
exact same
prose.
dimensions. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get that out there, because we ended up
No,
like going off on another tangent,
no, I
talking about
agree.
Calcatarn last time. But go ahead.
Yeah, no. So their story, I mean, it was really fleshed out the best and the most in those three, that little trilogy of graphic novels. Um, and Jan Ors was a working as a rebel. Kyle was had just graduated or was about to graduate the Imperial Academy, was going to be an officer, was leading his very first mission ever. It was supposed to be really routine. Turns out there were a bunch of rebel insurgents in this place where he was. All of his like most of his squad is killed, and they find a bunch of unarmed rebels in the back there, and they have this kind of he kind of makes eye contact with Jan, and they have this sort of like weird ripple moment through the force where they realize that the other person is going to be really important to the other person's destiny, and he ends up letting them go. He and his the men under his command are really upset about it, but he's like, they're not hurting anybody, don't worry about them, like I'll deal with command. And shortly after that, Kyle leaves and uh, leaves the Empire because he finds out that his dad was killed by the Empire and is obviously very disenchanted with it and tries to defect and ends up finding Jan. And Jan has the jump on him and decides not to kill him, even though all of the other insurgents that she's with are like, what are you doing? Kill this guy. And she's like, nope, we're even now. He let me live. I let him live. That's it. And they start to go their separate ways, and then Kyle convinces her to let him join, explains what happened with his dad. Eventually he finds out the whole, how deep that goes, but their relationship together starts out as this very like Romeo and Juliet were on opposite factions, and the force just kind of guides them along their path together. And it doesn't take very long before Jan is just like completely trusts him. And even though she kind of betrays his trust a little bit, Kyle is just like, I don't know, I got a good feeling about you, even though you. Basically, Mon Mothma does not trust Kyle at all. Because she's like, why would this guy just graduated the academy, and they know his father. They like, because his dad, the reason his dad was killed is because he was working for the rebels and was actually really disappointed that Kyle's career opportunities were so limited that Kyle decided to join the Imperial Academy, just kind of to like develop trade, trade and whatever. So anyway, these two characters just kind of like build this relationship together, and by the end of the story, they're just like inseparable. And what I also like about it is, the really cheesy old, PCs, like cutscenes, right? Like, because we didn't really get a lot of their character until, like, yes, those novels did flesh everything out, but the first time we actually felt more about them as characters was not Dark Forces, it was Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2. And that game, the game itself holds up really well for a late 90s game, but the CGI cutscenes, which are a blend of live action shots filmed against a green screen, so you have actual actors doing the green screen stuff, and then just like peak 90s horrible CGI, like filmed at really low resolution. It's like super pixely, but like it's so good, man. It's so campy and it's so awesome. And
Yeah,
it's
it's like
wonderful.
12 frames a second. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's great. And like this also came at a time where Jedi in their prime weren't like it came out before Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
So you see Jedi flying, you see Jedi like just doing these like crazy things that like are not canon at all. Like all the bad guy Jedi, and like all the bad guy Jedi have like yellow and blue lightsabers, and it's like really wild. There's a few guys that have red, but still, it's very just like, what is going on with this? When you watch it now, there's like a lot of the hallmarks of Star Wars or it took a lot of liberties because it was doing a lot of guesswork on what a Jedi is, like a fully trained Jedi, like actually is. But anyway, in that game specifically, Jan was not only the damsel in distress, she had like a lot more personality and stuff like that, but she is kind of used as your the moment where you're choosing if you're going to go light side or dark side. And throughout the game, it was one of those early games. I can't think of a game before this game where your choices in the game mattered and the things that you did mattered. And I mean, maybe not choices so much as which direction you were kind of choosing to put your ability points. If you were doing more dark side points, you're going to get that dark side ending. If you were doing more light side points, you're going to get that light side ending. And the pivotal moment of the game where it completely diverts from light side to dark side is when the main villain has Jan on her knees in front of you, and he's just like, yeah, if you want to join the dark side, you have to kill her, and then we'll totally hang out, and we'll do some dark Jedi stuff together, and we'll rule the galaxy. It's gonna be awesome. And in the dark side ending, he does, like, in the next scene, he kills her, and it's crazy. But I love that it was just their relationship is supposed to be like that moment of, you know, well, now you're totally gone, right? Like you've chosen your path. Now you're going to be a bad guy. And it just like veers off into this insane thing where like you kill everybody and you become the emperor of the empire, and one of the dark Jedi is like your servants, and it's just crazy. But anyway, reeling it back into the two of them, I remember really loving the idea that, well, there isn't just Han and Leia in Star Wars. Like, there's room for other types of relationships, because Han and Leia, I mean, we'll get to them later. Han and Leia is a very different relationship from a lot of romances in film in general, and even in Star Wars. But I always liked that Romeo and Juliet kind of thing, and that mutual respect that the two of them had, and they just implicitly trusted each other and had each other's backs. And I don't know, man, they're very high on my list. I don't think they hold up compared to a lot of the people on this list that we're going to get into, but I was very impressed when I was kind of going back and reading those novels again, and kind of thinking about them as characters, because it's been a while since I've really thought about them, with them being legends and everything. But I think they hold up. Like, I think their relationship really holds up. So I don't know. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, my familiarity with Kyle Katarn is New Jedi Order stuff and
Okay, yeah,
Jedi Outcast, right? So there's not a lot of Jan
yeah,
in Jedi
not very much
Outcast.
there. Yeah.
So I don't have nearly as much familiarity, but yeah, I do like know that they're in there, like they're one of the more important ones sort of in the
Mm,
EU,
yeah.
especially because like at that time there's really wasn't a lot. Okay, I'm gonna put them under Finn and Poe, above Finn and Rose.
I could not agree more.
Okay, cool. Okay, next one. This one will probably end up pretty high up, but it's not. It's no longer canon, but it was
Hmm.
canon for a long time, and
Hmm.
that is Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade, who becomes Mara Jade Skywalker. So these guys are canon, and they are together, and they have a son, Ben Skywalker. So I I this is my thing, is that
Oh boy.
Luke in the EU is a very different character from Luke in the movies, as far as I'm concerned, and I would
Okay,
have said
yeah.
that before The Last Jedi. Um, EU Luke is a Saturday morning cartoon superhero, and that's fine for the EU. Those books and comics and even some video games and stuff like that, that's what they needed, right? And that's what Luke needed to be for those stories.
Mm,
I don't consider him a very well-rounded, very thoughtfully crafted character. um a lot of the things that people complain about with Rey are actually things that EU Luke like epitomizes. So a lot of the Mary Sue conversations and that sort of thing,
mm,
where it's like, listen, if Luke needs to be able to do something, he'll be able to do it. And that's it, like, that's fine. But again, it is a Saturday morning comic book superhero thing. Stan Lee would often say, if Spider-Man's got to fight the Hulk, who's going to win?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And his answer is, well, whose book is it? Is
Yeah.
it Spider-Man's book?
Who
Because if
who
it's
needs to
Spider-Man's
win?
book, then
Yeah.
Spider-Man's going to win, right? Whatever's going to serve the story. If Spider-Man needs to lose to the Hulk in order for his story to progress, he's going to lose to the Hulk. It's not about who's more powerful. It's about, like what's right for the story. And so the storytellers in the EU, they needed characters that could do things, and the stakes had to constantly get increased, and the threats had to get bigger and bigger in order to sell more books and to keep people engaged. And so Luke just got progressively more and more powerful. And along with that, Mara Jade, who is created as this character, this femme fatale in Star Wars, and we've talked about it. I don't like the Zahn stuff, but I do like Mara Jade as a character, and I like where she goes, and I think that she's very interesting.
I think she has a cool premise for sure.
Yeah. I like the idea of a femme fatale Jedi, like that eventually
Yeah.
she turns to the light, and and that, like, that Luke is the influence of that. And she was kind of like a lost soul, right? I mean, like, she has a lot in common with Starkiller. She has a lot in common with
Mhm.
Vader.
Oh, there's one we should add to the list.
Starkiller and Vader.
Uno and Stark.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Vader and Starkiller's clone. Yeah.
Yeah. No, my thing with the relationship between Luke and Mara Jade is that once they're married, she becomes a side character.
Yeah, for
She
sure. There's
ceases
not
to
much to
be
her. Yeah.
she ceases to be Mara Jade, and she becomes Mara Jade Skywalker, and
Right.
she turns into his wife and Ben's mother. And that has always bothered me. Cuz she was an interesting, well-rounded character, one of the best characters in the EU up until that point. And then they did that, and it was a whole big thing. There was a comic book about it, and like it was like this whole like celebration of like Luke Skywalker's finally getting married. um
Can I quickly,
yeah.
just 2 seconds, point away from Star Wars? Videl from Dragon Ball used to be like one of my favorite characters until she
Mm.
married Gohan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now she's just Gohan's wife.
That is, I
I hate
am
it.
I am
Hate
currently
it.
making my way through Super, and it is the thing that pisses me off every time she
I
shows up.
love Boo Saga Videl so much.
Yeah.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
And then she's just sidelined halfway through the Boo Saga, and then that's it. That's the end of her.
Yeah, Akira
Drives me
Toriyama's got
nuts.
some ideas about women
Yeah.
and marriage
Yep.
that I don't think
Yep.
really vibe in the year 2024. So
Yep.
him making new stories in this day and age, I think he needs a
Help.
little bit of help. But anyways,
No.
again,
Okay.
this
I'm
is a
sorry.
Thunderquack
I know. I'm
conversation.
sorry.
No,
I'm sorry.
hey,
But like you said it, and I
yeah,
immediately thought of Videl, and she's one of my
when no,
favorites.
it's a great point to bring up, because it's a 1-to-1 for sure. Like
Yeah.
you've nailed it. That, like, because the same thing happened to Chi-Chi, right? Chi-Chi was a
Yeah.
fighter,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then
Sure.
we
Yeah.
get to Dragon Ball Z, and we learn that, like, okay, so they've got a son, they've got Gohan, and then the next time we see her, she's like, I hate fighting should never happen.
Yeah.
And it's like, you fought in the World Martial Arts Tournament, like, what are you talking about, Chi-Chi? Like, you beat the crap out of Goku the first time that you met him. Like, that's why he loves you. Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand. Anyways, table this. This is a conversation. When I finish Dragon Ball Super, we'll
Okay.
have a conversation
All
about
right.
Dragon
Cool.
Ball on Thunderquack. But
Awesome.
yeah. So yeah, like for that alone, I feel like this relationship can't rank as high as it would otherwise. Their
Mhm.
romance, I think, is really great, and that early stuff in New Jedi Order, I think, is really great. Like of them developing that relationship, and obviously, like, it is an enemies to lovers relationship, which is one of my favorites. So it's I like, it fits that bill, and I like that dynamic of it and that tension. But yeah, it does eventually just sort of like fizzle out, and
Mhm.
then she dies in the books, doesn't she? Eventually,
Yeah.
like
I think Jason kills her
yeah, which is
when he
that. So
becomes
yeah,
the
so they
Sith.
just they fridge her in order to motivate Luke's storyline, and that I'll never be cool with. So yeah, So with all of that in mind, I'm gonna put them. I will start the bidding at underneath Finn and Rose at number
Yeah,
4. Okay.
yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Anything you got? Anything else to say about Luke and Mara?
No, no, you covered the bases. Pretty good.
Okay, cool. Han and Kira. Now, obviously, this one can't rank the highest because it can't be over Han and Leia. But how do we feel about the relationship between Han and Kira?
Yeah, I mean, this to me feels very unrequited because I
Mm-hmm.
mean, obviously they were together when they were younger, but like it was brief. We didn't get a ton of it, and then after that, it was, she's the one that got away, right? So I love their dynamic. I love their relationship. I love that Amelia Clark is her name, right?
Yeah.
The Khaleesi lady.
Yeah.
Um, she's Daenerys to me. Um, I really love the way she played it. Like you could at any given moment, whenever the two of them had a moment together, you could tell that there were things she wanted to say that she couldn't say. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like I really I like the way they're portrayed, and but she chose her life, right? And it wasn't Han. She did what she had to do to survive, and she's not as naive as Han. But if she really wanted to choose Han, she probably could have figured out a way and gone on the run. And yeah, it would have been super dangerous, and who knows what Maul would have done. But it's I think it was a very compelling relationship because I was very interested in like, will they, won't they? Obviously they won't because Leia is a thing later, but um I was very invested in the two
Mm-hmm.
of them. So it was already more compelling to me than most of the list that we've gone through so far. So what about you?
Yeah, I really like them together. I think first off that Amelia Clark and Alden Ehrenreich had just like great chemistry.
Yeah, for sure.
I but again, like Alden is another one of those actors. I feel like Alden had great chemistry with everybody on screen in that movie.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
He
I mean
really
like
did, didn't he? Yeah.
yeah, it's one of the reasons why Solo is my favorite Star Wars movie. So,
Mm.
because he is so charming and so wonderful, and you root for him, right? And it breaks your heart every time. This is the one of those things, much like Anakin turning into Vader. Every time I get to the end of Solo, and there's that great shot of they're kind of making eye contact cinematically, but obviously they can't be, but she's in the shadow, in that very like film noir 1930s sort of lighting, and he's watching that ship fly away, and it breaks my heart every time. I'm like, but you guys would have been so great together,
Mm.
but yeah, but ultimately it's doomed, so it's one of those things. It has to be because the rest of the story is what the rest of
Yeah,
the story is. So,
yeah, of course.
but I love them together. I this one ranks really high for me. I would put it right underneath Finn and Poe.
Yeah, okay. I can
Yeah,
get behind that.
you go with that.
As much as I love Kyle and Jan, I
Yeah,
I recognize that because their source material is so limited that there's just the movie stuff, the TV stuff is gonna hit harder, right?
yeah.
The stuff that we spend more time with people is gonna hit harder. Yeah, no, that's a good
Also,
spot.
just like the stuff with, like, no offense to the actors in the Dark Forces games, but like the stuff with like real screen actors is it's gonna hit harder. It is, because
Yeah,
you've got
yeah,
like you're talking about movie stars and not like
yeah, yeah.
people
Of
who
course.
acted in video games in the 90s.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
so
Tim Curry was a wonderful actor in video games in the '90s, but
hey, I mean, like, no one has ever said space better. So you're right.
Nice.
You're right. I
Yeah,
Okay.
cool.
Next up, actually, I like this 1-2 combo that we've got coming up. We've got Asajj and Quinlan
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, we're gonna have Cal and Marin. I
Yeah.
think that there's a lot of similarities
Yeah.
in here.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, Night Sisters, so that's gonna do
Mm-hmm.
it. But more than that, Asajj and Quinlan. Hi, listen, I we didn't get to see this come to fruition on screen in the way that we all wanted to, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is in Dark Disciple, and I I'm gonna go ahead and say I think Asajj and Quinlan are the hottest couple in Star Wars.
For sure.
Like in terms of like raw like sexuality,
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah.
Quinlan is a character who should never be wearing a shirt. And Asajj has that yeah, she's got that again, that step on me energy like Bo-Katan,
Oh man. Yeah, she's so punk rock, man. She's
And I don't
awesome.
know. I guess we're kind of like telling on ourselves a little bit, you and I, that we're, just a couple of beta cucks, but I but I like listen, nothing is sexier to me than a powerful woman, and that can mean a
Mhm.
lot of different things.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I like a lady that can handle herself is something that goes a long way for me. So um and more than that, a lady that can put me in my place is also appreciated, I like these things about Asajj's character. I didn't when she was first introduced. It's so funny because like I really didn't like Asajj Ventress initially, and then over the course of the
Are,
Clone
are
Wars they
we are we talking like micro series and comics, or
I
are
mean,
you talking
micro
Clone
series.
Wars, like the
Yeah, micro
series,
series.
or
We kind of talked about this at one point. I think I brought this up. I mean, in the micro series, she's just a Darth Maul, right?
yeah,
Like,
there's just
and when
not
I
much
say
to
that,
her. Period. Yeah.
yeah, like a Darth Maul Boba Fett, right? Of like introduced and like no story, right? There's nothing here really. There's a bit of an introduction, a bit of an origin, but not really much to go on, not much character. So she's fine. She's an adversary for Anakin, and that's fine. Visually, she's great, taken from the art book. Um, that all works for me, and I have no problem with it. But if you were like, do you like that character, I'd be like, not really. Like, it just doesn't really do anything for me. Like the goth chick thing isn't really my vibe. um
It's mine.
okay, that's good. I should say, like, there are different flavors of goth chick, and the shaved head, I excessive eyeliner goth chick is kind of a little bit outside my outside my interests. But I as the Clone Wars goes on and her story evolves and she evolves as a character and we learn more about her and she becomes more well-rounded, when she shows up in that Ahsoka episode, when Ahsoka's on the run, right, and they team up,
Mhm.
my opinion 180'd. I it completely 180'd, and I was like, I love this character. I love what they've done. I love that she's a hero now, and like we get the Boba Fett episode as well, where she's like straight up the protagonist of that story, and then Dark Disciple just like seals it. Like Dark Disciple is one of the better novels, one of the better Star Wars novels. I think it's in that wonderful era between, because there's sort of the from the Clone Wars. And when I say the Clone Wars, I'm talking like micro series, like actually between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. That
Mhm.
stuff where we've got like Shatterpoint, Cestus Deception, Labyrinth of Evil, some really great Star Wars novels. And then up until really like Dark Disciple and New Dawn, there's some really good stuff in there, which, because that's the beginning of the Disney era.
Mhm.
Um, and then after that, I haven't really, there's not been a lot that I've really vibed with. Brotherhood is the only one that comes to mind that I
I really
really
need to finish that.
liked.
I did the first 100 pages and really liked
Brotherhood's
it,
really
but
good.
I never got around to
And
finishing it.
there's some good Asajj stuff in Brotherhood, because there's some stuff from
Yeah, because
Obi-Wan's
it's the first
perspective.
time they ever meet her, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and he's got some things to say about her, which
He
is,
calls her
it's,
hot in Dark Disciple when
yeah,
when they're briefing Quinlan. He's
yeah,
like, yeah, by the way, she's really hot, so like don't be surprised. Like
yeah,
try to simp for her a little bit, and Quinn's like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, it's gonna be suspicious if you don't, so
Yeah.
be flirty."
Um but yeah, so to that end, Quinlan falling for her, him being similarly like on sort of the precipice, right? Like they come at it from opposite sides, where like she is a dark sider who returns to the light, and he is a light sider that like flirts with the dark, right?
Mhm.
Um,
But there
it,
is a complication
yeah,
in their relationship. Uh, she killed his master, and he did not know that.
mhm.
So
Well,
there is
that's but doesn't that just make it all that much
yes,
better?
it
Like
does. It
it's
does.
juicy,
It
right?
does.
That's what.
Technically, it's.
Yeah,
I mean, she did it. She made the choice to do it, but it was Count Dooku's orders
yeah,
to kill
yeah,
him. So she when she first tells him, she doesn't actually admit to it. She's like, "Oh yeah, Dooku killed him," but then she's
mhm,
like, "So he kinda did. It was really me, but he told me
yeah,
to, so it's like
yeah.
he did it."
Um, yeah, and so like these two, like I said, like this is the hottest couple in Star Wars. I think that that's actually just like I yeah, it's just right there. This is the
It
hottest couple in Star
it is
Wars.
implied that they do, like, do it, right?
Mhm,
Like,
mhm,
they do the thing.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Um, so for that, I don't know if I put them above Finn and Poe. I kind of want to. You know what? I'm going to because they're real.
They're
That's
actually
canon.
together, yeah,
So I am going to
yeah,
because they're as hot as Finn and Poe together. But like you said, like they actually did it. Like they
yeah.
actually did the deed. It's canon. They got nasty. And therefore they win. They win on that front. Okay, so they're currently our
Now,
number one, Asajj and Quinlan.
without saying I mean, we only know so much anyway, but are you hoping that because we know Ventress is coming back to Bad
Yeah.
Batch. Are you hoping there's any Quinlan also? Or do you feel like, "No, let Ventress just do her thing, don't shoehorn in Quinlan." I'm praying.
Yeah.
I'm borderline, like, almost want Quinlan as much as I want Delta Squad now in Bad Batch. Like, I really want Quinlan to show up.
I think so. Quinlan is from the Obi-Wan series, we know he's still around. He survived
Mhm,
Order 66, so we know he's
mhm,
there. Um, and he is one of the main architects of the path, right? Like it's like he's the one ferrying a lot of these kids across the galaxy and keeping them safe.
mhm.
I i yeah, I mean, like I want to see that storyline fulfilled. um
Tales of the
I
Jedi maybe season 2, but
sorry.
maybe Tales of the Jedi season 2. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of this hinges on whatever Lucasfilm Animation is working on next.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
they are working on something that relates into post Return of the Jedi, Jedi Order, I think that you have to bring Quinlan into it. I think you have to bring Koran Horn into it, and I think you have to then also bring Asajj in. I think it's why they are bringing Asajj back in Bad Batch. I think it's why they're using her, is to like not have all of that happen at once, but to have like Asajj makes her come back in this. Quinlan got name dropped Koran Horn didn't get name dropped, but it's written on the
He's
wall,
there.
right? And it's implied that the kid that we see get rescued, or not rescued, like that
Haja.
um yeah, that Haja helps. Like it's implied that that's Koran, right?
Yeah.
So um we've kind of had those characters introduced. We get Asajj introduced, and then when we do, whether it's I mean, like you could just wouldn't Path of the Jedi be a great title for a show, right?
Nate.
Like that would be awesome. And if it was like Path of the Jedi and it was like a parallel thing of like the thing that's difficult is that the path is also tied into Cal Kestis, and so
Right.
like does Cal need to show up as well? But if we had a parallel story of like the path and then also of Luke's academy, and these two things happening at once that leads into New Jedi Order and the stuff with Rey, and that we established that like Rey actually doesn't have to start from scratch. She just has to find them. And that's what she's been doing. She's been like gathering the Jedi, these like disparate Jedi enclaves that are across the galaxy. So like you could even have it that like Cal has one, Quinlan has one, Luke had one, that like that there was more out there, that these Jedi that survived went off into these different places, and we don't know what's happened with Ezra at this point. Like we know where he is in the Mando storyline, but we don't know where he is in the sequel timeline. So, or Ahsoka, right? So like, what's up with that, right? So I think you could tell some stories in that era in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens with these characters. I would love to see it, and I would love to see Quinlan and Asajj be one of those. I would love to see what their version of the Jedi Order looks like. I think that that's actually really interesting because you get to play with some of the ideas that they played with in the EU with Jason and Vergier, right? With like, because Vergier was like the Force is not the light side or the dark side. Like those are constructs that we put on them. The Force is the light side and the dark side. Both of these things are the Force, right? And so like that was kind of her whole deal. And then Jason was like, oh, so we can use both. And then obviously that was a bad idea. But but to have some characters who have that experience and can speak to that, I think would be really cool. I also would love to see a little bit of the concept fulfilled for what Asajj was meant to be in Star Wars Resistance, because she was originally supposed to come back in that, and then they replaced her with another character, Mika Gray, because they weren't prepared to bring her back yet. So so they created another character that's sort of, I mean, she is just basically I will say this: you could absolutely, we know, well, I don't know. I'd have to double check Mika Gray and look her up again, but I think that there's room that you could say that Mika Gray is Asajj Ventress under like she just has a new identity,
Okay.
right? And you could retcon that and be like, nope, she was Asajj the whole time, and then all of a sudden Resistance would be infinitely more interesting. At least those couple of episodes that she's in. But I'd have to. It's been so long since I've watched that Resistance stuff, like 4 years at this point. So I'd have to go back and like revisit it to see if that's actually possible. But but I don't know. It could be fun. It could be fun. You could play with it, I think. I'm trying to remember if they're both voiced by Nika Futterman. I don't remember who voices Mika Gray in Star Wars Resistance, but yeah. Okay. We placed them on the list already, so
Yeah.
we're good to move
We're
on
good.
to Cal and Marin. This one's real easy. I mean, like we've kind of saved the bestest ones for last, right? Cal and Marin are a fantastic couple, but I'm a little bit worried that they're doomed. So I'm just gonna say this right now: if you haven't played Jedi Survivor, we're gonna have some spoilers for that in this conversation. So go play Jedi
I mean,
Survivor and then come back.
even saying Cal and Marin is a
Sure.
spoiler, but
I mean, it is, but I've also got Finn and Poe and Din and Bo-Katan
sure.
on here, right?
Yeah,
So,
fair.
like we're kind of playing fast and loose with what it means, but because after the first game, everybody was like, these two should be together.
Yeah, because she hugged him.
Yeah. I but in Jedi Survivor, that does culminate, right? It becomes a thing. And you kind of did you read Battle Scars?
I didn't, and I was going to ask if you did, because I
Yeah.
think we had talked briefly about it when we actually talked about playing through the game, and you had kind of given me the premise. But for anyone who did not
Yeah.
read it or hear that episode,
So in Battle Scars, we get a lot of Cal's inner monologue, and Cal's inner monologue is, I'm really, really hot for Marin. It's actually like the majority of his motivation in that novel. I don't think I finished it. I think I've got like 2 chapters left or something, and then I got distracted by another book and haven't gone back. And then the game came out, and it was like, okay, well, I wanted to finish this before the game, and whatever. I but Marin has a relationship with somebody else in the novel, and Cal is like very jealous of it, which is it actually informs a lot of the vibe at the beginning of the game when they see each other again.
Yeah, it's just like awkward and
Yeah.
yeah.
Because she kind of knows, like she's not stupid. He is. He's a big dumb soft boy, but she's a very intuitive, very perceptive individual. So she's like, I recognize that he's sitting over there like staring daggers at my new girlfriend and pining for me, but like I can't make my decisions based on his inability to deal with his own emotions, right?
Yeah.
um so she's kind of just frustrated with him, and I think that what that comes down to is the like if you have something to say it, Cal, right? And so
Yeah.
eventually they get into the situation in the game where she's like, if you are not gonna say anything, like I'm just gonna do this, right? And so she kisses him, and then the best sequence in the video game, one of the best sequences in video games,
Yeah.
happens after that with the roller coaster, the the portals roller coaster, fighting the octopus uh, droid thing from the Clone Wars. I'm like, man, Jedi Survivor is so good. Oh my god, what a game that was.
Dude, I mean, I again, because this is more ThunderQuack, but like we ate so well last year with
Oh
video
my god.
games and like giant sequences that were like actually good and
Yeah.
satisfying. Like, oh man, 2023 was ballistic for good video games. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, feast and famine though, because now we're sitting here 2 months
Oh my
into
god, I know.
2024, and I'm like, are video games
Nothing. Well,
like?
next week, but
Yeah, okay,
after next week, nothing.
yeah. So Cal and Marin, I like them together a lot. This was like an OTP for me before it was official, and so I was really pulling for it. So when they kissed
Yeah,
in Survivor, I was like, yeah, let's go. I mean, like
yeah.
I was like tingles, like tears of joy, happy when it happened. That's not an exaggeration. Like I was so elated by it, and then it was followed by just one of my favorite gaming moments of last year, if not one of my
Yeah,
favorite gaming moments of my life.
yeah,
Yeah. So I don't know. I think they're pretty high up,
yeah. For me too. I mean, honestly,
above Asajj and Quinlan, or yeah,
I'd rank them one right now for me.
yeah. Me too. Me too. I Kanan and Hera.
Damn, so good.
I'm gonna
They're
say
so
this:
good. They're so good.
Kanan and Hera is the best relationship in Star Wars.
Yeah.
I it is tragic, but there is nothing. Um, I don't know. I don't want to say problematic, because I don't think that there's anything problematic with Han and Leia's relationship either, or
Mm,
Obi-Wan and Satine. But like there aren't the complications as much as there are, as much as like their relationship is something that like they keep on the down low, and it's not really like front and center. It is ever present, and it's healthy. It's like they're the way that they conceal their relationship is not, there isn't one of them going like, hey, I can't have people know this. It's both of them going, if this is going to work, we have to keep it to ourselves, right?
yeah.
Like in order for us to be together, this has to be something that is just for us. It can't belong to the rebellion. It can't belong to even the rest of the ghost crew, right? So it's like I think that like the only ones in the crew who knew that the two of them were together in that way were Sabine and Chopper. Like I think Zeb was
Yeah. Clueless.
oblivious, and Ezra doesn't understand anything about anything. So
Yeah.
um yeah, like even with their family, it was still like a QT thing. But but despite all of that, their relationship was totally healthy and totally like productive and um, an asset to them both,
Yeah.
right? Although it is what ultimately gets Kanan killed. I mean, like that's Kanan. So this is the I hate that Kanan is dead. The way that Kanan
Yeah.
dies is one of the reasons he's one of my favorite characters. It's the reason that he's my number two, right? Like what he dies for and how he does it and the way that it is portrayed is all bundled in there into like this is why Kanan is my second favorite character. And I'm actually right now I'm considering getting a tattoo. I want to get a couple of three in total actually. Um but the first one that I want to do will probably be Kanan. It'll be Kanan inspired. I don't know exactly how I'm gonna go about it, but yeah, like he is it depends on the day of the week. Like Obi-Wan has the top spot because he's Obi-Wan and it's really hard to dethrone Obi-Wan. But I feel more deeply connected to Kanan than I do to Obi-Wan. And I think that one of the reasons is this relationship. It's Obi-Wan.
That wasn't me farting. If that picked up my
Oh,
very leather chair just rubbed against my desk.
I don't
Sorry.
think it did.
Sorry
I
about that, everybody.
No, it's okay. Obi-Wan, and we'll talk about it in a second, like literally next. His tragic love story is a failure to admit to himself like who he is and how he feels. And
Mm.
I think that ultimately that is where he fails and why he fails Anakin. So for Obi-Wan, it's like that relationship is his downfall. I think it's actually his greatest downfall. It's his biggest weakness. Whereas with Kanan being the opposite, having the opposite perspective, and right from the get-go in New Dawn, have you read New Dawn?
When it came
Long,
out, it's
long
it's
time ago.
when the two
Yeah.
of them meet, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I did read it. I don't remember it that well
I mean, like from the moment that he sees Hera, he's like, this woman is
though.
everything to me. And he lives that his entire life.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I can relate to that. And I find that to be an admirable quality. Even though the Jedi Order looks at that as forbidden. um
Yeah. Well, how'd that work out for them?
yeah, exactly, right? Like I think that Kanan I think that the relationship between with that Kanan shares with Ezra and that Kanan shares with Hera, in fact, like with all of them, is the ideal Jedi. I think that
Mm.
Obi-Wan is the ideal of what the old Republic Jedi Order was meant to be. And if all of them were like him, the order probably wouldn't have fallen. But all of them are not
Yeah.
like him because he's Obi-Wan and he's the ideal, right?
Mm.
But I think that Kanan is actually the ideal of what a Jedi should be, which is to say that like and this actually this builds into my philosophy around like what George's original concept for the Jedi were, and that the Skywalkers were a family, and like the master Padawan relationship was often a parent to child relationship.
Yeah.
And the relationship between Kanan and Ezra, although he is not his actual son, he is his adopted son, right? He doesn't just take him on as a Padawan; he takes him on as a member of of his family, as
Mm.
well as everybody else around him. So he is a Jedi amongst the people, not separate and in the order, right? He's not like secular, right? Like
Mm.
he's like of the world, and that makes him a much better Jedi. It's really funny because this actually relates really, really heavily into my relationship with Christianity and my relationship with having worked for the church, and a conversation that I had with Carl on the weekend. But like I in order for a Jedi to be effective, they have to be in touch with the galaxy and the living force, and in order to do that, they have to be in community. They have to be in a family, and that family might not necessarily all be Jedi. It could be like it could be a family of Jedi, and I think that that would be totally valid as well. But I think that they should be nomadic, and I think that they should be in a like in a tight community like that where they are serving and a part of a larger organism as opposed to an organism unto themselves, which is what the Jedi Order became. That
Yeah.
could then be manipulated by the Republic and by Sidious, right? So my philosophy on the Jedi is integrally tied into the relationship between Kanan and Hera, as well as the fact that Kanan is one of my favorite characters, as well as the fact that I think that they are the best example of a healthy relationship, possibly the only example of a healthy relationship in all of Star Wars.
Yeah.
I put them at number one right now. I will maintain that they should be at number one by the end of this.
I mean, for sure. For me, like where they are right now. I mean, I might have to talk out some of these things.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I mean, unquestionably, right now, number one.
Yeah.
The thing that I've always really loved about them is that, other than the fact that I mean, you already said it, they're space mom and dad, right? Like
Yeah.
they're they're the best parents in Star Wars as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Din is pretty great with Grogu, but like he's a single dad. I'm talking about like parents, like two making a unit parenting the kids. I think they're the best parents in Star Wars, and I really appreciated that the two of like always communicated. Like anytime there was a problem, whether it was with each other or somebody was having doubts about somebody else, one of them would come along, give the other one perspective, and then all of a sudden things would be a lot clearer. And the new approach that that character would take would then be more informed. And it's because they have that great communication and that trust and that insight. And like, they're just like I feel like that could be my number one by the end of this too. Um, yeah, man, they're it's like when you in like in real life when you meet that couple that like are so awesome together and you're like, that's relationship goals right there. That's the two of
Yeah.
these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the most fun things about it is that like it was there from the beginning. It was baked
Yeah.
into their
Yeah.
characters because New Dawn came out before the series, but it's in the prologue stuff,
Mm,
the mini episodes introducing the characters. It's
yeah.
there. Like if you go back and you watch those prologues, those character introductions, there are hints of it in there, and there's stuff all over season one. So like this was not a thing that happened. This was baked into how these characters were written. And if I had to guess, I think it's probably very reflective of Dave Filoni's relationship with his wife, who every time he talks about her in like a very like she's like his best sounding board and best supporter and all of that sort of thing. So I think that he cooked a lot of that relationship. I mean, that's what we do as creators and storytellers, right?
Mm.
Is that that's how you get there, is you take your experiences and you put that in there. So yeah, I would imagine that that's very much tied into that, and it's one of the reasons why it's so authentic, I think, and it comes across in the way that it does. Awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
Kanan and Hera, they're currently at number one. Obi-Wan and Satine. Now, I love this relationship, and I love the two of them together.
Yeah.
But boy, oh boy, is it fraught.
it's 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 a rough one. I mean, this is one I would love to see on Tales of the Jedi. I don't think we ever will, but I want to see them meeting and you know
Yeah,
flirty and how she got the scar when he dropped her. Like I love the two of them together, but obviously they don't make it. They don't make it, and they don't make it because Obi-Wan chooses not to, and she essentially chooses not to because he says, "Oh well, if you said the word, I would have left the Jedi Order." But like that's probably not how she wanted him to do it. She didn't want him to do it because she asked. I'm sure she would want him to do it because he chose to do it. Um, so yeah, they're as much as I love them as characters, as a couple, that doesn't really work.
Yeah, it is, as I said before, like this relationship and its failure
Mm-hmm.
to me is one of the most important pieces of the Clone Wars that we didn't have before,
Yeah,
that informs Revenge of the Sith and
yeah,
everything that comes after it.
yeah.
I mean, the fact that it was not mentioned in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, I think is
Oh, criminal.
offensive. Yeah, criminal.
Criminal.
Because in my opinion, one of the reasons why Obi-Wan is able to look past and ignore the warning signs in relation to Padme is because of his own
Yeah.
feelings towards Satine. and
Mm,
and so I mean, we know from the final season of Clone Wars that Obi-Wan knew, right?
yeah.
It's academic at this point. It's not something that we like that's implied. It's something that is almost stated. uh he's turning a blind eye, and at that point in the story, and especially like Obi-Wan's character in Revenge of the Sith becomes very, very like uh very tragic, very sad when you put into context that like like within the last year or so, his the only love of his life, the true, well, actually that's not necessarily true, because there's also the one from when he was a Padawan in those uh teen books, but um those like early, not, they're not early readers, they're like middle grade
Mm,
novels about him as a Padawan. But um he lost the love of his life in the most tragic way possible.
yeah.
And he is, although not responsible, he is also directly responsible, right? His inability to stop Maul, and the fact that, I mean, like, listen, I don't think that we can blame Obi-Wan. He cut the dude in half. um and then he came back, then there were two of them now, and the other one was even bigger. And Maul had raptor robot legs. Like, there's a lot of reasons why Obi-Wan was not able to deal with Maul. And then he had to deal with the Mandalorians and Maul at the same time,
Mm,
right? But the reason why Satine is murdered is is because Maul is getting revenge.
yeah.
So it is a direct result of the actions of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now,
Mm,
Obi-Wan is doing what he thinks is right in those moments, and so, but again, this is ultimately the failing of the Jedi, is that, like, they seek violent solutions to violent problems, and like their way of dealing with the Sith was not a good way of dealing with the Sith, and it's one of the reasons why the Jedi Order falls. So all of that is tied into it. um and when you watch Revenge of the Sith now, and he's like, happy go lucky, another happy landing, oh, you've earned your time with the politicians.
yeah.
That's, when you're watching that the first time in 2000, and what is it, 2005,
Yeah.
you're going like, oh, that's just charming old Obi-Wan. When you watch it now, it's like, oh, Buddy's got the mask up heavy. He, they are in the middle of a war where he has
Yeah.
seen hundreds of his friends die, thousands if you include the clone troopers, right? Like, he doesn't have personal relationships with, but he does have a connection to. He has shut off his ability to empathize and feel pain, to the degree that he is ignoring the biggest threat in front of him, which is
Mm,
Anakin about to fall to the dark side, right? Like, and so, um in the same way that Luke cuts himself off from the Force, I feel like Obi-Wan, like as a result of this loss, which is one of the reasons why attachment is forbidden and all of that, right? Because, but this happens because the Jedi Order doesn't teach them how to deal with this stuff,
yeah.
right? Because like, abstaining is never a great way of learning to deal with a problem. You have to meet the problem head on, right? Just trying to quit alcohol cold turkey, right, is not a great solution. The 12-step program, things like Alcoholics Anonymous, they work because you are meeting it head on and you're confronting it and you're in community and there are other people to support you, right? But if you just try and go cold turkey, it's very difficult, right? It's never a solution to not be prepared to face the demons that you're gonna have to face in your life. Like you should always meet that stuff head on, and you should, if you're in the position of teaching other human beings how to deal with stuff, like, you should not avoid things in that way. And so the Jedi Order, this is what they taught him. He is, like I said, he is the ideal of what the Jedi Order expects a Jedi to be. And that's where it's like he doesn't leave the Jedi Order, but he says to her, like, if you had said the word, I would have left. And Satine's response is, that's exactly why I never did. Like, that's exactly why I never did, because, like, they need you more than I need you, and the galaxy needs you more. It's, these two, it's just like, come on, you guys. They both would have been better people had they embraced this relationship and lived in it instead of denying their feelings, right? But so I don't know, I love it because I love what it does for Obi-Wan's story. And when I watch the Obi-Wan series, the sadness that he is experiencing is not just about Anakin. It is also about that. It's about the Republic. It's about everything that he stood for no longer existing, and it's about his inability now to do anything, to take any action. And that's where Leia comes in and heals him, and that's why that series is so good, in my opinion. Like, from a writing standpoint, it is a beautiful story because it's so transformative for him. I really wish that this relationship was at least mentioned. But that's why we need a season 2. That's why we need a season 2 with Quinlan, because Quinlan needs to be the one to tell him these things. Quinlan needs to be the one to say to him, like, hey, you dealt with that Anakin thing, and that's great. I'm happy for you. But, like, you got to confront this. You have to, and because something has to have changed in him between the end of the Clone Wars, Revenge of the Sith, and when he sees Maul. Because, like, the last time he saw Maul between Rebels and Clone Wars was when Maul killed Satine. So the fact that he, like, meets Maul and is, like, level-headed and empathetic and actually, like, gentle and caring towards him, something happened. Some story has to have happened in between, and so he has to deal with that. There has to be a story where he deals with that. It has to exist, and it does not yet. And so I hope that they make it. I'm available, guys. I've never written a TV show before, but I could do it. I say that all the time, but yeah,
I'll give Dave a call after this and
do that.
Tell him what's what.
Okay, so the question becomes, where do they sit in this ranking?
For me, they kind of land with Han and Kira. For me, they're above Han and Kira.
Okay. Yep. I agree. Okay. Cool. Do we want to get into this one? There's only so much time. So now we got to talk about Reylo. The last two will be easy, but we got to talk about Reylo. So you have an opinion.
I sure do.
On Kylo Ren.
I sure do.
And that opinion, I think, is a subject for an episode all on its own. So I don't want to get too deep into this.
Okay.
But I will say that, similar to the Dinbo thing, I think that you are taking things a little bit too literally. And I think that you're applying some real world stuff to mythic archetypes, and I don't think that that's a necessarily appropriate or healthy way to engage with mythic storytelling. Okay. I think it's I'll put it on this level. If you are reading Greek myth, those characters do all sorts of atrocious things.
Mm-hmm.
And yet some of them are still called heroes, and we're fine with that. And the romances are still the romances that are in there. And I the character traits are heightened. They are arch because of the medium, because of the type of story that it is. And this is a really great example of that, is that like Kylo Ren is a very heightened villain, even by Star Wars standards. But there is also a great deal of logic, and I think there's a lot of empathy that needs to be like shown to the character. I think that's what Rey does. I think that the transformation in The Last Jedi is that Rey begins to have empathy for him, and see things from his perspective. And I think that when you do that, I think the core here is that you have a problem with The Last Jedi, and
No,
and
it is not The Last Jedi. I mean, I don't
no,
like The Last Jedi, but that's not the core of the problem. I promise you.
but no, but it is, because you like you
I
your
promise it's
issue.
not. I
No,
promise
it
it's
is. It
not.
is. Let me get through this, because I understand where you're at, because I was there before. Like, I felt the same way of like, he is abusive, he is controlling and manipulative, he gaslights her, he does do all of these things.
Mhm.
But there's a dynamic that you have to play into this. You can't infantilize Rey, first and foremost. When he does these things, he fails every time. It never works,
Mhm.
right? So
Okay.
he negs her, and he gaslights her, and every time, like that very first time when he's like before he goes into her mind, right? To pull out the location on the map, like to pull the map out, she's affected by it, right? But then the second that she sees even just the smallest glimpse of who he is on the inside, that he's a scared child, it flips. The power dynamic flips, and it never goes back. She's in control for the rest of the story,
Mhm.
right? So when he then tries to like say stuff about, like, I mean, he said the stuff about Han Solo or whatever, and that gets to her. But then like everything else that he says to her after that is like, he's just like, you're just afraid that you'll never be as powerful as Darth Vader. Like, you're just a sad little boy, and like you just want your mommy and daddy, and like she just shuts him down. He never after that has any power. So um to me, the dynamic completely changes, and this is something that like I had to like come to and understand, and it's not necessarily surface, but it is all there in the Force Awakens. Like, and I denied it for a long time, but my co-host on Quiver, as well as on the old version of the ThunderQuack podcast, Amanda, she was a Reylo from day one. Like, literally from day one, from the first time that she saw the Force Awakens, she was like, they're gonna kiss. And I was like, you're crazy, he's the bad guy. And then like I had all of my opinions on it and stuff, and then I stepped in it on Twitter one day, and the Raylos like came after me. And that was when I like had to confront the reality that my perspective was incredibly flawed, because I was looking at Rey as a victim in all of it. And when I looked at Rey as a victim, it was very easy to look at Kylo Ren as a monster. But the second that you shift it and you realize that like Rey is a woman with her own agency and more power than Kylo Ren, more power than Ben Solo, more power than Palpatine, right? Like, I when you shift it and you start to look at it from that perspective, you start to see Ben Solo as the character that he actually is. And there's also an aspect of Star Wars. We do it with Vader. We did it with Asajj. We do it with a lot of characters in Star Wars. Their dark side persona is not who they are. It's a shadow version, right? And it's because it's mythic storytelling. They are one in the same, but they are alternate versions of the character, right? So when Vader sacrifices himself to defeat Palpatine and comes back as Anakin, and we see his Force ghost at the end, like, we accept that, and it's and we're actually happy about it. It's fulfilling. It's the point of it. Now, the sequel trilogy does not do a good job of getting us there, right? There's a lot of extra work that has to be done. So this is a failing of those movies, of all three of them. As much as I love The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, it is a failing of all three movies that this was not the plan from the beginning, and they did not have, there was not a goal in telling the story, right? And there wasn't a goal in telling the story in the original trilogy until Empire, right? Which is why A New Hope has none of it. Like, there's very, very, like, Vader and Anakin are different characters in that movie until the point that Empire comes out and retcons it, and they're the same guy, right? I firmly believe that, and if you look at the original screenplay, they are separate characters. Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker are not the same person. In fact, they are both in the movie in the first draft. If you read the Star Wars, they're separate people, and eventually George merges them together. But when he hits Empire, he has an idea, and the idea is the redemption of Darth Vader. Like, that's ultimately where this story is going to go, and that's what's going to save the galaxy, right? Not murdering him, but saving him, redeeming him. And then I am of the personal belief that the sequel trilogy was meant to be the first half of two trilogies, and that the marching orders that Rian Johnson was working with were that this trilogy is going to end off with Kylo Ren as the supreme leader in the place of Palpatine and Vader, like a combination of the two characters, and like he will be the ultimate bad guy in Star Wars. And then we'll come back and we'll do 3 more movies with these characters because we've invested in them and we want them to be on lunchboxes and stuff. And in those 3 movies, he'll be redeemed. And so we'll have 3 movies to do it. And instead, after The Last Jedi and Solo, they went, we need to pivot away from the legacy characters, wrap it up. It's the end of the Skywalker saga. And they booted Trevorrow, and they brought J.J. Abrams back, and that like messed up the whole thing. And so we get this like microwaved version of a redemption arc for Kylo Ren that then makes it it's a hard pill to swallow, but not because of the things that the character has done, because of the way that his redemption was executed. She stabs him and he becomes a good guy again, and it doesn't make any sense, and it's not earned, and it's poorly executed in like textbook fashion. If you wanted like Terrio is the worst writer in Hollywood, and there are a lot of bad writers in Hollywood, but he's the worst because he gets the opportunity to work with the best things and just like absolutely whiffs it. Like the table is set and he messes it all up. So I think all of that contributes into a perspective on these two characters that is held by a lot of people, because I would say that it's kind of 50-50. Actually, it's probably like split 3 ways, of people like me who are Raylos and are very much invested in the two of them together, people like you who are like, no, never, and then people in the middle who are like, I don't care.
The Harrison Fords.
Yeah. And they're probably the best off, those people in the middle.
Yeah.
The Bendu, let's
people
call them.
with no real opinion on it.
Yeah. But I do think if you've read The Rise of Kylo Ren, and if you've really like studied that, like the dynamic between Rey and Ben from like The Last Jedi in particular, it becomes very clear to me that like he's a sympathetic character. He wasn't originally meant to be, and Adam Driver has talked about that originally he was meant to be seen as the bad guy, viewed as the bad guy, but then The Last Jedi kind of changed that, and then Rise of Skywalker cements it, right? But I think what Ryan was trying to do was to give us a connection into his grief, into like it gave us that window to Ben Solo that allowed us to understand the darkness that was Kylo Ren. Um, but then it doesn't get followed up on in the right way, and I think as a result, you end up with this muddled story with that character who is not then later viewed as the like honestly, the bad guys in this story
Dude, at
are
some point you
not.
got to give me a chance to respond. You're throwing
Yeah,
so much at me, man.
I know. This is my last point. This is
You're
what
killing me.
I'll end on. The
Okay.
bad guys in the story, and I think this is what it comes down to for me. The bad guys in the story of Kylo Ren are not even Palpatine and Snoke. The bad guys in that story are Leia and Han, which is really, really hard to swallow, but it's true. Because Leia, if you this is also it sucks because so much of this is EU garbage. It's like it's all in books and stuff, and it's not in the movies, but it is in the canon story. If you read Bloodline, Leia is more concerned with her political career than she is with raising a kid.
Mm.
Han is floundering being a dad and gets no support from her. She just ignores it because she's dealing with this political stuff that ends up blowing up in her face because her Vader as her father is revealed, and like that takes over everything, right? And ultimately because of that, like the two of them fail Ben, and then they try and offload it onto Luke, and it's not his responsibility, and he's got enough on his shoulders, this entire galaxy. And then when you add in the complication on top of that, that the presence that he feels when he looks inside Ben's mind is Palpatine, who should be dead, right? But is the darkest presence in the entire galaxy. And he looks inside Ben's mind, and he goes and he immediately reacts to that. As I've said on podcasts before, the same way that he does on the second Death Star, he ignites that lightsaber without thinking, right? That all of those emotions come flooding back. To me, that's my read of that scene. And then you've got Ben, who is just like a child at the mercy of all of these adults who can't handle their own business, and Palpatine and Snoke come in and take advantage of that. So yes, they are monsters and they are villains in that, but like the table is set there by Han and Leia. And there's a great scene in Last Shot, which is the tie-in novel to Solo of all things. There's a great scene with Lando and Ben. Lando calls him Little Starfighter, and there's this great moment between the two of them. Like Han is having the roughest time with this kid. He just does not know what he's doing. And Lando shows up and instantly knows how to handle a kid, and like gives Ben the love and the nurturing and the care that he's craving. And like you see it in this scene, and it's like when I put that in perspective to everything else that I've just said, it's like if not for his really, really crappy parents who were two adults who couldn't figure themselves out, much less figure out raising a kid, he probably would not have fallen to the dark side, and he would have been the most powerful Jedi the galaxy had ever known. But instead, the story goes the way that it does. So yeah, it's tragic. And then Rey brings him back, and that to me, she does it out of love and compassion because she sees what he is. She sees him for who he truly is, which is to say, like that broken kid, but also with a capacity for love and caring um that is the counter. It's the flip side to the anger and the pain that he brings. So yeah. Okay, I'm done. You can talk now.
You sure threw a lot at me, man.
Yeah.
I'm not going to counter everything because I'm not going to remember everything to counter.
That's fair.
Um, Look, man, it does not stem from Last Jedi. It does not stem from Rey's a victim. I don't think Rey's a victim. Rey's never a victim. Rey barely has any struggles in these movies, and that's my problem with Rey as a character. Um, the issue I have is that I think it would have worked a lot better if she brought him back and forgave him and that was it. And then he went off and did his Ronin thing and went and like healed the galaxy one person at a time. If he was literally Ronin from Star Wars Visions, that would have been the perfect ending to Ben, in my opinion. And that's a story I would have loved to have followed. But the way it stands is he spent 2.5 movies trying to kill Rey. Doesn't matter if he's able to kill Rey. It's that he was trying to kill Rey. Like, he kidnapped Rey. He invaded her mind without her consent. He literally tried to kill her 3 times. He's constantly manipulating her and gaslighting her, like you said. Like, yeah, I get it. We don't have to take these things as literally as we do a more grounded in reality story. But the fact remains, anybody who tries to do this to you, it's kind of weird that you fall in love with them. It just doesn't click for me. It just doesn't make sense. If any of your friends were dating a guy who was doing these things, you would say, get the hell away from this guy. Like,
Yeah.
don't date this guy. Are you insane? Like, no rational minded person would do that. And that's the problem that I have with it is Rey's not a victim, but it's almost like this weird domestic violence thing going on where she just, like, no matter what he does, she keeps, oh no, he's good. He didn't mean it. He's really a nice, like, I hate it. I hate the message that it sends. It makes no sense to me. And like, this is a rhetorical question because like, I know we're running out of time here, but like, if you're telling me that she loves him because she feels sorry for him, because up until the point where they actually kiss, the only thing he does for her is show up at the end and help her kill Palpatine. Other than that, what is there to love about him? All I see when I see Ben Solo and Rey are the horrible things that he did to her up until the point where he's like, hey, yeah, I screwed up. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done any of that stuff. And like, when people say stuff like, oh, well, Darth Vader was redeemed and we gave him a pass, like, kinda, but like, I wouldn't suggest that Padme go back to Anakin either if he, like, were still alive. Because, like, he did some pretty terrible things to her, included, like, as well as everybody. Like, yeah, it's one thing to genuinely be sorry for horrible, unspeakably evil things that you've done to the people that you love and the galaxy at large. And it's like to be genuinely remorseful for those things and to change your ways and honestly like redeem your actions. I mean, there really is no redemption if we're going to be honest about that stuff. But there is something to say about it's never too late to change the person that you're going to be, right? You can't change the past. You can only do what you can in the present and with your future. But like, just because you forgive somebody doesn't mean you should have to have like a relationship with that person moving forward. In fact, it's probably wise not to. I mean, there's a case to be made that like, well, part of forgiving someone is giving them that second chance and that clean slate. But like, maybe not for Space Hitler. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe it's not that smart to do that. But like, I don't know. Like, it doesn't click for me. And I can totally get behind her, just like Luke saying, no, there is good in him. That, like, it's there, I sense it, I see it, I understand who he is as a person, I understand how he ended up down this way. I also can even understand that there's the capacity for every single human being to end up like Ben Solo or to end up like Darth Vader. Like, nobody's perfect. As soon as people get hungry, they can do horrible, horrible things, right? Just to like not be hungry and like save their family and all that stuff. So it's certainly not coming from like a judgmental place of like, well, he just sucks and like that's it. But it's once you become that person, how reliable of a person are you once you come back? It's one of those things where, okay, he comes back. If you told me, okay, let's say for a second that Ben survived, did his Ronin thing, and in the Ray movie came back, and then in the Ray movie they got together. That I'm behind. That would make more sense to me. But because of the way that it happened, and it's the storytelling part of like what happened. Because it was just so like immediately like, oh, I knew he was great. I knew I could fix him. Smooch. Like, I love him. He didn't do anything to earn that love. He was just like a project. She pitied him and like understood where he was coming from. Like, what do you love about him? What good thing? He's not doing anything good. Like, yeah, maybe it's in there deep down, but he's not doing anything good. He's a horrible, horrible person. And it's just like, oh, he came back and rescued me. I knew he'd save me because I wouldn't have been able to do it without him. That's the only time she feels like a victim to me. The one time in the entire trilogy where it felt like, oh, Rey isn't going to be able to do this thing on her own is when he showed up and like I hate it. Dude, I hate it so much. Like I almost swore just now. I hate this character dynamic, and I hate even more that from well before we got to this point that people like they're going to be amazing together. I don't know, man. I hate it. I really, really do.
I will say, okay, so I'm only gonna say two things
Oh my god.
to counter.
Oh
No,
my
they're
god.
they're short.
Okay.
The first one is super short. This type of romance isn't for you, and
It's not.
I think that
It's
like
not. It'll never be.
not even in the sense of like it's not your taste, right?
Mm.
It is specifically not designed for you. It is a type of romance that is designed for generalizing here, but like it is designed for a female audience. And so you and I, with our lived experience, not gonna vibe with it in the way that a lot of women in Western culture are going to, right?
Mm.
So I think like that's number one. So there's a little bit of like you have to step outside yourself and really like listen to other perspectives in order to appreciate the elements of this story that do work and the elements of the romance that do work. Um, the other part of it is that like ultimately I think you and I are in agreement on a lot of this, which is that like yeah it is a broken story because it's not told properly. So
Mm.
it's not complete, but there is a potential there that I see and that I appreciate. Um, and there was a version of the two of them getting together that would have worked. But unfortunately, we have Rise of Skywalker, and we have to live with Rise of Skywalker. We always will. This isn't a comic book issue that can get retconned in 10 years because Mephisto waves his hand, right? Like the Star Wars canon is the Star Wars canon, and if it's in a movie, then it's in a movie, and it's kind of indelible. So so that kind of sucks in that way, right? But um yeah, I don't know if you're not into, if there's not a part of you that's into like the like the monster thing, then you know, like if you don't, if you don't engage with like romance on that level, then I don't know that I'll ever get you there. But
Dude, it's so weird though, because like Beauty and the Beast, love
yeah,
that movie.
okay,
I don't know. I don't, it's he does so many horrible things to her over the course of 3 movies that I'm
he
just like, screw
does,
this
he
guy.
does,
Screw
he
this
does.
guy. It's not even because like Beauty and the Beast is different, right? Like, yeah, he's mean at first, and then he's like soft with her, and it's a very gradual thing. But
I
like,
think so. Yeah,
it's
that was the other
so
thing.
like whiplash in
Yeah,
this story.
so that was my other thing is that it's not. I don't. It's not that she sees the when I say that like she looks in his mind and especially like when he's telling her about what Luke did and his perspective on it, she sees an insight. And when they touch hands, right, she
Mm.
sees an insight into him of like of how he got to be the way that he is. That gives her the empathy to then see the potential of who he should have been, if not for all of these people that let him down, right? And I think the reason why they are connected, both like in terms of like a romantic story as well as mythically as a dyad, is because she relates to that pretty hard, right? Who would Ray have been if her parents had been different people? Right?
Mm.
Like if her parents had had the ability to raise her the way that she deserved to be raised, and she wasn't left on Jakku with Unkar Plutt. And like, I mean, like, listen, again, another place where Tross just completely fails these characters and their stories is that none of it makes any sense. None of Ray's story at that point makes any sense. But the way in which she was like her parents needed to eat, they needed to be nothing. They needed to be filthy junk traders that traded her for booze, right? Like that her being Ray Nobody worked so much better for her story, especially her connection into Kylo and into Ben, because it's like he came from everything and she came from nothing, and yet like they were both failed by their parents, and that's how they ended up where they are. And that's the connection, that's the dyad, right? Her parents being like these wonderful loving people that were just, it was just circumstance. So like leave her with somebody that's not a disgusting blobfish
Yeah.
that's gonna treat her like crap. Like, why did you like, and I'm sorry, but nothing that they've put out so far justifies any of that, as much as there are people out there that want to tell you that Shadow of the Sith somehow fixes Tross. It doesn't. It is just 600 pages of, yeah, but the dagger is the key. That doesn't explain anything. We knew that the dagger was a MacGuffin. Telling us that the dagger was a MacGuffin for 13 hours of a book doesn't fix that story. Telling us that her parents were wonderful people doesn't fix that story. It actually makes it make less sense. Why would they do that? Telling us that Luke was that close to her and then just ignored that fact and was just like, huh, oh, well, I guess I've got other stuff going on, makes that story worse. It makes Luke a worse character, right? Like it just, everything in that book to me, like it that book was given an edict of like, you got to do a certain thing, and as a result it ends up being what it is. But anyways, we have to talk about the last two.
We will, but real quick,
Yeah.
because like as you were talking, I kind of like it occurred to me, I would have really liked it if they had this toxic relationship and leaned into it, right? Like
Yeah.
all of the everybody knows you should not be, doing this with this guy, and like have him be that narcissistic, manipulative dude. Because like, I mean, I don't know if everybody's experienced this, but like I've been with someone who's a really bad fit for me, and like you're focused on the wrong things, and what works for you really works, and you're ignoring all the bad things. That would have been a more interesting story for me, for her to overcome that and find the strength to get out of that. That would have been awesome to me. But instead, we got what we got.
Yeah, I mean, had they stuck to their guns, had they fulfilled the first sequel trilogy and left him as the Emperor at
Yeah.
the end of it, and then come back and done 3 more stories, and in those 3 more stories we got, like, I agree, like I think some of that dynamic would have been good. I think her not giving up on him, and Finn and Poe being like,
Yeah.
come
Right?
on,
That would have
right?
been awesome. And
But
then
I
that
also
causes
like,
tension between them. Like, that would have been
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, and then you have flirtation with the dark side on Rey's part, because she's like, she feels isolated and that sort of thing. Like you could have told a really, really great story with those characters. I also, this is the other piece that I would have put in that I think would have gone a long way in making Ben a sympathetic character. I would have built in a connection between Poe and Ben, that because their parents knew each other, their parents were in fact friends, right? Kes Dameron was part of the strike team on Endor. He was part of Han Solo's rebel team, right? Like they worked hand in hand. What is it? Shattered Empire? Yeah, Shattered Empire is the comic series that's like
Mm.
picks up in the Battle of Endor and then like goes on after that to the Battle of Jakku, right? and tells the story of Kes Dameron and Shara Bay, Poe's parents, in relation to everybody else. Shara had a relationship with Luke, like they were friends, and Kes had a relationship with Han, and they both knew Leia, right? And so it is logical to me that Ben and Poe grew up around each other. And so I would love to write a story. They ruined Poe's backstory in Trust as well. They ruined so many things. I would love to write a story, or to have a story of like Ben would go to Yavin basically for like summer break, because like Yavin was kind of like this bustling new settlement, and that's where Poe grew up, right? Was on Yavin 4. So I would have loved to have had a story where Poe and Ben were like kids, like at a perfect like Dennis the Menace mischievous age, and like went into a Masasi temple and like interacted with like some ancient Sith stuff, and you got like hints of Ben's future and all of that sort of thing, but that you established this relationship between the two of them, that they were like best friends at a certain point, right? Like summer camp buddies, right? And that Kylo knows that when he's got Poe Dameron in that chair in The Force Awakens. And so when he's saying like, oh, I didn't know the Resistance's best pilot was on board, right? Like he's doing that, but like Poe doesn't know that Kylo Ren is Ben. And so at a certain point in the story, you get to reveal that to Poe, and then you get to see Poe wrestle with that of like, well, we can't kill him, right? Like if it would have been Poe Dameron being like, we have to do something, like after Leia dies, it's like we have to bring him back, right? It's like that, like Vader came back, why can't he come back, right? Instead of it being Rey. I think that would have been so much better and so much more interesting for the audience, and then everybody could have like gone with Rey on a journey of like doing that. Anyways, that's how I would have done it over the course of another 3 movies. But in any case, I think we're putting them underneath Luke and Mara Jade and above Din and Bo.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
Anakin and Padme, Han and Leia. Are we Han and Leia, we don't even need to discuss. Han and Leia are pretty perfect. I mean, what they did to them in the sequel trilogy, I think, is unfair to the characters. Yep. But if we're going to talk about original trilogy, they're the template, right?
Yeah, they're awesome. I mean, I do have problems with Han not always taking no for an answer. But, you know.
Yeah.
Different times. It's fine.
Absolutely.
But, yeah. Just Han and Leia. They're Star Wars romance, right?
I think the good thing about Han and Leia is the stuff that happens off screen in between A New Hope and Empire. And I think that the murkiness of that informs a lot of Han's behavior. Han's behavior. Yeah. Man. Han's behavior in Empire. And so the stuff that you're talking about, like the not taking no for an answer, the like, oh, like, oh, you like me because I'm a scoundrel. Like that whole scene, which is like one of the best scenes with the two of them. But like, I take your meaning on it of like, yeah, it is like she is saying go away, and he is saying, no, you want this. And it is a little bit creepy. The way it can work is if she's the one who came on to him before. Yeah. That like started this whole thing. It like when they ran into that bounty hunter on Ord Mantell and all of that stuff, when all of that was going on. And I think there is a story where like the two of them, I think it's when they discover Hoth, and I think they like crash and they're like stuck in a thing. Maybe it's like it's not a Star Wars Tales, because you would know that if it were.
No, that is not in Star Wars Tales.
But I think that there's a story somewhere of the like how like what happened between the two of them that like caused this tension that we see at the beginning of Empire. And for me, it would be like, yeah, if they were like in that situation and she was the one who leaned in first, right? Like a very like Ross and Rachel thing, like on Friends.
Wasn't there a Valentine's Day like one-off?
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Because I remember them like in a blanket together on the cover, and it's like, ooh, looks spicy.
Yeah, so to me it's like if you put that context on there, that she initiated things with Han, that like he was very much like listen, like, you know, like the attitude that he has in A New Hope, where he's like, come on, man, like stop giving me such a hard time. If they were then in that scenario and she like leaned in and kissed him, and that was the thing that like clicked for him, and he was like, oh oh oh, this thing between us isn't, we don't hate each other, we love each other, right? So then when he's like, come on, like you're lying to yourself, right? Like, because that's what he's saying to her, is like, you've got this idea of like you're this princess and you have to be these things to all of these people, but you don't have to be that with me, right? And I think that's ultimately what makes them work together. I think that that's where their relationship dynamic works. And it becomes when he stops being Han Solo and has to then become General Solo and then Ben's father and all of this stuff, that's where their relationship ends up breaking down. Is that like like when he accepts her life and leaves his behind, that he can only sustain that for so long, and eventually he has to go, right?
Mm,
And so he goes off and he does his racing thing and he's never around, and that leads to Ben not having a father figure and Ben going down the path that he goes down, which then ultimately is what splits the two of them, right? So
mm.
it's yeah, I don't know. I think if anything, the one who gets the short shrift by the end of that relationship is absolutely Han, and we see that in The Force Awakens
Right.
when she's like, "Oh, new jacket." He's like, "No, it's the same jacket." Or no, she's like, "Same jacket." He's like,
Other
"No,
way
it's new.
around, yeah.
It's new."
No, it's
The other
new.
way around. It's like, "No, it's new." And it's like she just. Uh, I think that she takes Han for granted for who he is. A lot of this is in Last Shot. So if people haven't read Last Shot, there's a lot in that one where it's like where Han's inner monologue is sort of expressing that like this life that they've built together, as much as it's everything that he ever wanted, like he doesn't have a wife, he has a chancellor,
Mhm.
right? Like
Yeah.
like they are not together. She goes off to run the galaxy and he's left to raise a kid by himself, and then he eventually abandons that to go race, and then they just leave the kid with a droid, right? um so yeah, like I don't know, like Leia kind of ignores all of those familial relationships. She makes the mistake that the Jedi made. It's actually interesting because I don't think that any of that is intentional. I think that that's just sort of like they put them in a position because they had to, in order to like they contrive this thing with Ben Solo and Kylo Ren, that then you have to have other authors go back and other storytellers fill in the blanks. But um where do we put them, under Han, under Kanan and Hera?
Yeah, I think so. I love me some Cal
Whoops.
Marin, but how dare you, Ray and Ben?
Yeah, that's what was in my clipboard. um okay, so Anakin and Padme. Anakin and Padme, Anakin
Dude,
and Padme, Anakin and
dude.
Padme.
He kills her, and he's
Yeah.
super jealous and never trusts her during the Clone Wars with Rush Clone. Like, they suck.
So they are star-crossed lovers,
They suck.
right? That's why their love theme is across the stars. This is very much in the text. They actually don't love each other.
Hmm.
I think that they love each other in a way,
I think they care about each other.
but I
I mean,
think that
obviously,
they are
Anakin does. Yeah.
I think that they are infatuated with one another, and I
Yes.
think that they represent things to one another that they are in love with, but that it is ultimately the reason why it's a tragic, like destined tragic relationship, is
Mhm.
because they do not actually know one another,
Yeah.
right? They each have an idea of the person they think they're in love with. And I think that all that stuff in Revenge of the Sith, where he's like, no, it's only because I love you so much, and she's like, oh, so love has blinded you, and it like all of that stuff back and forth. It's like, so you guys know that this actually isn't working, right? Like you're like, deep down, I think both of them are fully aware that this is like teen infatuation that has gone way too far. But they're both so pot committed that there's no pulling out of the tailspin.
Yeah.
There's just not like, and especially like once she's pregnant, right? Like that's where it just becomes the thing of like, well, now Palpatine's got everything he needs. Now that's the last piece, and now you're totally screwed, guys. Like the galaxy is done because you guys couldn't keep it in your pants. And yeah, it's like that, her confession on Geonosis of like I've been in love with you since we, that kiss that we never should, like all of that stuff. It's like no, you guys are aware, you guys are aware, but it's dangerous and it's secret and it's exciting, and you're in the middle of the war, so you never actually have to face any of it because he's off fighting a war, and man, he could die, might not be a problem for much longer, right? Like I think like there is an element there of them just being like their weekend boyfriend girlfriend that are married, right? And they rush
Yeah,
into
I
it.
mean, basically, yeah. There's
So,
almost a codependency to them.
oh, 1,000%, 1,000%, it's a codependent relationship. Yeah, because
Well,
he
I
feels.
don't think Padme has like a lot of the telltale signs of like the person who is needed, because like a lot of the times it's like they just need to be needed, right? Because they have like low self-esteem or whatever. But
Mhm.
um Anakin like literally kills all his friends because he can't lose Padme, like, and does terrible, terrible, terrible things because he can't live without her.
I think that Padme's the deleted scenes from Attack of the Clones actually like give you so much insight into this, into like her family and her past and stuff. So I hate that they're not in there. But how crass can I be on this podcast? I She is with Anakin because she needs a big man with the ability to keep her satisfied and at an arm's length. She specifically is with Anakin because she's not supposed to be. And
Mm.
that's where the codependency comes in, is that
Okay.
like she is absolutely using him for his lightsaber. Uh and I don't think that she's aware of it. Like I don't think that she's done the introspection to know that that's what's going on in her own head, because she's busy trying to save the galaxy from the separatists and all of this stuff that's going on. So the two of them trick one another into thinking that they're in this real loving relationship, but there's never actually any love that happens between them. There's a lot of rescuing back
Mm.
and forth, which is so it's sort of that thing of like relationships that are formed in traumatic situations tend to
Yeah,
not
sure.
last, right? um but these two never have to confront that because the traumatic situations just keep coming. Like every week there's another one, right? By nature of just,
Literally.
yeah. So they managed to make it all the way through the Clone Wars, never having to actually be together in
Mhm.
a real way or figure out what that's going to mean, right? And it's only once the pregnancy develops that now Anakin is forced to confront the reality of his situation, which is that this is untenable. You have to leave the Jedi Order, right? In order to be with Padme, you cannot be a Jedi.
Mm.
And Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan have put it in your head that that's all that you are and all that you can be. And I I mean, Qui-Gon, I don't think did that intentionally. I think Qui-Gon saw potential and then didn't get to finish that training. Obi-Wan made a promise, and so Anakin becomes that thing to him of like, you have to be a Jedi, you have to be the best Jedi, otherwise what did Qui-Gon die for, and why am I sacrificing my journey to in order to raise you, a kid that I didn't want, right? Like,
Damn.
so, oh dude, it's so Shakespearean, the whole thing. It's ridiculous. The prequels are so well written and people don't understand it. They just don't get it. But because this is all there, this is all in the text. And then the Clone Wars just makes it better. The Clone Wars just reinforces everything and makes things like even more clear, more and sharper focus. But ultimately, that relationship I maintain is actually like you want to talk about a toxic relationship. The relationship between Anakin and Padme is bad for both of them, and it ultimately ends with Padme's death.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
and
Anakin
Anakin's as
sucks.
well, from in a figurative way, right? Like it
Mm.
creates their poor decision making creates Darth Vader. She is as much responsible for Vader as he is. Um, it's a 3-person job.
Mm.
Because Obi-Wan is also in the mix there. Palpatine is actually, I think, responsible for very little. Palpatine opens the door, but Obi-Wan and Padme are the ones who push Anakin through it. So,
I mean, it's all just Othello, right? Like it's literally
yeah,
Palpatine's Iago, kind of.
yeah.
Was
It
it Cassius as Obi-Wan? And
when they dropped the idea that there would be like a love triangle between the
I
three
was
of
so
them,
into it. I was
it
so into it.
I think that was the biggest mistake of the prequels.
Yeah.
I don't think that Obi-Wan should have been into Padme, but I think that
Right.
if Padme was into Obi-Wan and like Anakin was the closest that she could get, that would have done
Oh
so
man.
much for the story and made everybody go, that's what's going on there. That's why he becomes Darth Vader.
Yeah.
That's why he turns against
Ah,
Obi-Wan. That's where
that
the
would have
angst
been
is.
awesome.
So instead we get the moment of like you've done this, you've turned her against me, which still works for me. It still is valid, but it is very much like that's the dark side now. That's Palpatine having manipulated him. But if it had actually been there, like if there had been truth to it of like, and Obi-Wan's like, I didn't do anything. I'm not responsible for how she feels. And I'm
Mm.
not responsible for you being jealous of that. Okay, I'm just me over here doing my thing, doing my best to save this galaxy from the doom that you've just I committed it to, right? Like I think that would have been so much more powerful than just you've done that yourself,
Yeah.
but
Instead of the weird
um
little scene where Anakin's playing a PSP and's like, I smell Obi-Wan's aftershave. Was he here? Like, yeah, he
yeah.
just came by. He was checking up on you. And then all of
Yeah.
a
So
sudden, you
like
turned her against me. Oh,
it's
okay.
there, the remnants of it are there, and I think that that's almost like the biggest shame of all of it is that's like, oh guys, it's there, but then
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't
Was it
follow through.
in the novel? No, right?
I don't think so.
I mean, obviously not as uh leaned into as you were suggesting that it would,
Yeah.
because I agree it would have worked that way. But I feel like there were like little,
His jealousy was, but
yeah,
it
okay,
was like it was him being like confused about everything, right? So
okay.
getting his inner monologue in the Revenge of
Mm,
the Sith novelization gave us more insight into that. So it wasn't just the one line of dialogue, but instead
yeah.
it was him like being jealous of a lot of things with Obi-Wan, because he's also like jealous of Obi-Wan's ability and Obi-Wan's
Mm,
position in the on the council, and like there's more to it than just
yeah,
Padme, right?
yeah.
In the novelization. But yeah, but there's nothing on the Padme side in anything. That all got dropped. But I feel like that if you started Attack of the Clones with Padme being like, "Oh, Anakin, you've grown so much. You've gotten so big," and then her turning to Obi-Wan and being like, "Hi, Obi-Wan," right?
Hey
Can you
man.
imagine if she was like, "Hi, Ben,"
Oh, that would have been
right?
rad.
And that's where the nickname came from, instead of it coming from Satine, that it came from
Yeah.
Padme, and that Anakin's like, his name's Obi-Wan. You call him Master Kenobi, right? Like, and like there being like tension between the two of them. Oh, it could have been so good. It could have been so good, but they got
Yeah.
scared. They got scared. They didn't want to make Obi-Wan into that kind of a character, and they didn't want to undermine Padme, I think.
Mm.
Um,
All right.
but
Well, where are we putting these idiots?
I think that they are under Obi-Wan and Satine. That's my they are still a great couple. I still love them together. I wouldn't change it for the world.
I mean, they're below Kyle and Jan for me, but it's
Are
it's
they?
okay. It's okay.
No, I'm gonna
They
give it
don't
to
get
you. I'm gonna give it
oh,
to you.
all right. Because
Okay.
unlike Anakin and Padme, Kyle doesn't try to kill Jan unless you choose the dark side ending. But he
Yeah.
didn't. Canon
That's not
ending.
that's not the canon ending. Yeah, because
He
there's a game
didn't
after
do it.
that. Yeah. She's still alive.
She
And he's
is
on the
still
light side.
alive.
Okay. Well, so these are our rankings then. We didn't wake up this morning planning to rank these relationships, but we have. And here they are. So at number 14, Iden Versio and Del Miko. 13, Din, Jaren, and Bo Katan. At number 12, Ray and Ben, which breaks my heart, but it is what it is. At number 11, Luke and Mara Jade. At number 10, Finn and Rose. At number 9, Anakin and Padme. At number 8, Kyle Katarn and Jan Ors. Number 7, Han and Kira. Number 6, Obi-Wan and Satine. Number 5, Finn and Poe. I like our top 5. Our top 5 looks great. Number 4, Asajj and Quinlan. Number 3, Cal and Marin. Number 2, Han and Leia. And at number 1, the only healthy relationship in all of Star Wars, unless you count R2-D2 and C-3PO, Kanan and Hera. I guess Flix and Orca we could have put on this list as well from Resistance, but you haven't seen Resistance, so
I have not.
Yeah, they are together. They are together.
All right, without going into everything, Star Killer and Juno Eclipse, where would you throw
them? Oh, like so low on this list, dude. Under Iden and Del. Under Iden and Del. They're 15.
Really? Oh man, they're above them for me, but maybe I'd give you Din and Bo.
Yeah, Juno is just such a non-character. Like she's just there. She's just a girl in an Imperial outfit. And
I can't remember who it was. I always think of this phrase. The actress who turned down the role of Gozer. No, not Gozer. Maybe it was Gozer. No, I think it was Gozer. The actress who turned down the role of Gozer did so because she said the women in this movie are only there to be had. I think about that phrase all the time. I'm like, wow. Yeah. A lot of movies do that. But yeah, Juno was there just to be had. You're right.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, that's it. We did it. We ranked all of the relationships. No one asked us to, but we did it anyways. And I now you all have to live with it. And like all of our rankings, this is official and it's unquestionable.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, just, comport yourselves accordingly, I guess. That's what I have to say about that. Here's the biggest thing that I think that we can take away from this. Star Wars needs some healthier relationships. It definitely needs parents that don't die. And there's a lot of knowledge to be gleaned from these stories about how not to be with someone. Yeah. It's pretty unhealthy on the whole, but Kanan and Hera make up for all of it as far as I'm concerned. They're so wholesome. They're so wonderful. I'm just gonna go now, and I'm just gonna think about that. How about you?
Yeah, it's fine with me.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, Kanan and Hera, man.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Obviously, we're in the, I don't know if it's obvious, I guess. It's obvious to me. If you've been paying attention, I should say, we are in the middle of our pledge drive, or actually at the tail end of it, I suppose, when this episode goes out. But if you are listening to this on March 1st, technically it has ended, but there's still time. There's still time to jump over to patreon.com/ThunderQuack. All of the bonuses, everything that we did in the month of February is available to everyone, like in perpetuity. It's not going anywhere after February. It was just sort of like, hey, let's release all of this stuff all at once, and just get all of this awesome new content out there. So there are bonus episodes for all of the podcasts. You know what? There's a bonus episode for Forced Perspectives, but we still don't know what it is, because it's still a secret. So, as of right now, it's still a secret, even to us. But it does exist. It is there, and it's really good. So you guys should go listen to it on patreon.com/ThunderQuack. But along with that, I mean, like I just posted, as of this recording yesterday, I posted the episode of Kara and I talking about Young Jedi Adventures, and it was really fun. It's a really great conversation. It was a beast to edit, but it was a great conversation. So yeah, you can get that exclusively on Patreon. You can get Perfect 10 Star Wars as well as the pop quiz that goes along with that. It is all exclusively available on Patreon. The other thing is that you can get access to this early. You would be listening to this in February. if you were a Patreon supporter. So you'd have it like a full week early. So if that means anything to you, then head over to patreon.com/ThunderQuack and support us. But most importantly, like if you like the podcast that we do and you like the content that we're producing, then that is the best way to support us. And you get a bunch of bonus stuff along with it. Thank you to everybody who has jumped on and to our new pledges and everything. It's been a good month. But like I said, there's still time to jump on there and support us. No matter when you're listening to us, there's still time to support ThunderQuack and all of the stuff that we're doing. Don't forget to listen to Joe and I on the ThunderQuack podcast as well. We ranked the Pokemon in our bonus episode for that.
That was a fun one.
It's really good. Listen, everything that I've done this month has been really, really good. The episode of Perfect 10 that I just posted to Patreon last night is one of my favorites that we've done. It's just a regular episode, so it'll be on the regular feed. But for 10 Things I Hate About You with Ty, it's such a good episode. February has been a really good month. We've got really good stuff planned for the next little while as well, sort of in the near future. And we got Bad Batch coming back, guys. Go listen to Rebel Cells. It's out. If you're listening to actually, no matter what, when you're listening to this, Rebel Cells, the season premiere episode for Bad Batch is out now. So go listen, and be watching Bad Batch. So yeah, Joe and Kyle and I are having a great time over there as well. It's just good stuff all around ThunderQuack at the moment, and lots of cool stuff planned for the future. So make sure that you're following and part of the community. Join us on Discord, thunderquack.com/Discord. We'll take you to the invite, and then you can join our server and get in on the conversations over there. We have such an awesome community. It's been really great. The February has been really, really good. Even if the numbers aren't like super high, and I would love for us to be making $1 bajillion every month. It's just another reminder of how awesome our community is, and how awesome the people in it are, and how lucky we are that we don't have a bunch of those types of people from the internet hanging out with us. But that's it for this episode. Joe and I will be back in like a month, in about 4 weeks, for another episode of Force Perspectives. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you for listening to ThunderQuack Force Perspectives. Our opening theme is composed for us by Christy Carew. Follow Force Perspectives on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ForcePOV. And join us on Discord at thunderquack.com/Discord. Support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/ThunderQuack to get early access to episodes, leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast service, or buy merch at store.thunderquack.com. Force Perspectives is a part of the ThunderQuack Podcast Network.